I didn't post it. I'll post it right now. Hold on. Wait, let me invite.
I gotta. What I'm looking for.
Send me a fuse link.
Lo, are you streaming? Fuck. He's deafened. Never mind.
Lo's deafened still. He is though.
Trolling. Okay, I sent him it though.
Chat once again, y'all boys.
I sent you guys stream together. Hurry up.
5 seconds.
Yeah, DM me the link. DM me the link.
Oh, link. Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't pop up in my inbox.
Ooh, son, is that?
Chat, y'all boys like the double uploads up, man. Lock me in. Ooh.
I put it in Discord chat.
Into this screen.
Oh, this is annoying. I'm so sorry, chat. We're gonna be a second late, but it's okay. 1 sec.
Yeah, Keely.
Hey, my boy Jeff here. Hey. Did the fuse? I think the fuse worked.
It worked.
All right, chat. Y'all ready?
Yes, sir.
I got y'all with the screen. I'm sorry. I had to make sure that fuse was working.
I gotta pop up the chat.
It's a good one. Don't worry. All right. Hello, everybody.
Oh, okay. He says this every year.
I'm here.
We are indeed ready, bro.
Showcase of what's next.
Chat, you know we got to peep the drip.
We started SGF back in 2020 because we didn't want to lose that magic moment every June when gamers
Wait, you should invite me to the fuse.
come together to hype ourselves about the future. New worlds, new stories, new characters. Yeah, maybe the return of some fan favorites too. This is our 7th and biggest SGF. And I have to say, guys, the magic is back. We have a great show for you today.
Biggest? Really?
Now, over the next 2 hours, we, alongside some of the world's most talented game developers, are going to show you why gaming's best days are right ahead of us. What I love about SGF is that we put platforms and rivalries aside. It doesn't matter where you play. Everyone is welcome here today.
I'm stupid.
Right now, everyone has a lot of games to play. As you can see behind me, in just the first 5 months of 2026, Steam saw a record-setting 9,265 new game releases, and that's up from 7,800 last year. There are now more games and more creators than at any point in the history of this great medium. Now, sure, a cynic might look at those numbers and think, how can anyone possibly break through with their game? But then,
no way. Why is my thing buffering?
Closer. So far this year, 10 of those, they come from anyone possibly break through with their game. But then you look closer. So far this year, 14 new games are estimated to have sold more than 1 million copies on Steam. 10 of those, they come from independent publishers. Isn't that great?
In the back. Whoa.
Absolutely, and most of them were brand new IPs like
Why is Resident Evil up there?
That tells you something important. Players, you guys are hungry for new experiences. You want originality, games at different price points. And when developers take bold, creative swings, turns out you guys show up. Really great. So congratulations to all those games.
Why Jeff got look funny?
I know some games they become global blockbusters, but others have to find smaller, passionate communities.
What's up, JCA?
There we go. We caught.
Oh, I got me alerts.
That love them
Appreciate
deeply.
the primes.
And today, both of those kinds of success matter. The truth is, not every game has to be for everyone. That's what makes this medium so exciting right now. It makes SGF so rewarding. Because this show helps drive discovery. I hope you find your next favorite game
he put
today.
Resident Evil 9 up there.
To get wish listing. Should we get on with the show?
I don't get that, but whatever.
Bro, I hope they show the Isaac having chill up here.
Okay.
Doubt.
It's going to be a fun ride. So let's get started with our preview of what's ahead with our first announcement.
You guys better start with a banger, bro, please.
On me.
Well, what is this?
After that state of play.
Oh, yeah. Bust it open. Let's go.
The hell is this?
There you go, low milk. It's like a horror game or something. Nah, no way it is Wolf Among Us too, bro.
Bro, they do need the show of Among Us. It's been so long.
They do. You know how many people have been
What are these characters? I don't recognize these names.
Carson, Bruce.
Bro. Not say Bruce.
Concierge.
You said Brown.
My fault. Auntie.
Yes.
RE9 DLC?
So,
like, what is
you're
this?
the American who called earlier. The sister of the man on the third floor.
Who that is?
Jiggly, bro.
Welcome to Paris. It's so nice to meet you.
She gonna die.
It's freezing.
She gonna die. She gonna
Come
be
in.
the killer.
Come in. We don't want you to catch
Could be
cold.
Resident
Me, this look
Evil.
like RE graphics.
Like,
Yeah, it
Chris
does.
just see
Say it,
graphics.
but your brother is, well, quite odd.
Hell no, I'm not going.
Where's the
in there.
Ada DLC, bro? Where Ada Wong at? Come on. Put the Ada in the bag.
Oh hell no.
Oh, hell
Here
no.
we go.
Why did my video just freeze, dog? Yo, Con, I might need a stream, bro. Somebody.
Oh my shit.
Whenever. After
My
this,
shit
after this,
froze for
after
a
this.
little bit.
Oh la la.
Ada is old?
Mais quel
So
fracas.
what? What's that supposed to mean?
Such a mess
Yeah, ooh la
again.
la.
If you can't handle all that, just say so.
Think. I just
Ooh, what's
cleaned it
going
up
on?
a week ago.
What is this?
Behind, I know. I don't want
It's
to
like
skip
a
those.
boulder
I'm on
roll
I
this.
see
through
this exact
here.
same apartment in a Roblox horror game.
Killer beam. All right, ever.
Ah, the
I know you
delightful
had two
biscuit.
Thank you, Kuziko.
Hold on, twin. I'm trying to
Or
immerse.
whatever your name is.
I'm
Thank you
sure
for
you
following.
I'm
will
already
notice if we
behind.
help ourselves.
Oh shit.
I'll catch up after this one, chat.
Oh my god, this buffering is so ass. You can't even watch on Twitch because on Twitch is 720p cap.
I'm not
Boulder
buffering.
hold
Bro, it's
through here.
buffering
Killer
everywhere.
beam.
Boulder
And then it
hold through
rewinds.
Or
here.
whatever.
And then it rewinds.
Boulder
up, Tim?
hold through here.
People in the chat are saying holy lag.
Yeah, it's
Hey,
lagging. It's not even
chilling.
us.
I'm
It's
chilling on my part. I'm good.
you're damn right for no, it's them. Their shit's laggy as fuck. They must Street Fighter announcement. No, it just started.
What that say?
I know.
Delicious
Ooh,
du
what's those?
Marquis.
Dead in my quiz.
Ooh,
Nah,
cigarettes.
this ain't Ethan, bro. No way, this Ethan.
It's the
Oh shit.
Nah.
perks.
Oh.
So some perks.
What is that?
Hold on. Hold on.
Who that at the door, man?
Hello. Hello.
I wouldn't peek through that. I'm not gonna lie.
Me, I wouldn't.
Are you? Nah,
Oh, so
someone
we all
knocked and they're
still at
not
the same
there.
spot? He's gonna be behind him. Oh, and you opened the.
You open the door? Dude!
Oh, yo, the most idiotic.
Yeah, you see, this is why that new Silent Hill protagonist, a black guy, because
I'm
never.
saying, bro. Who would do that in that
What is
situation?
this?
Oh,
This is Resident Evil,
I seen the
but
beat, that's all I need
what
to see.
is it DLC or like
No way.
spin-off? Remake?
I thought the dumbest comment.
Wait, is it the 5 remake? Wait, I was right. Wait a second, I was right, chat.
Wait, this is a.
Oh, wait, it is. What the fuck?
It's a 5 remake. Oh my god, I was right.
Oh, yeah. Wow.
Veronica, let's go. It's a 5 remake.
I ain't gonna lie, I
Nice.
haven't played 5. It's one of the ones I ain't played.
I literally took
play
this off.
5?
I wrote this
Oh,
on the
right,
thing on the PlayStation 1 chat, and I took it off.
This one with Redfield. I do know that name though.
Remember, chat, we were talking, I was like, hopefully they do a remake of 5 and 6.
Bro, a hunk is gonna be. Wow.
27.
I ain't gonna lie, bro.
Oh,
Hey,
let's
oh.
go. Yeah, because the RE4 team is not working on anything, so surely they're working on 5, right?
Capcom on a roll. What a way to kick off the show. Resident Evil Veronica revisits
Cool.
a classic title from the
Starting off
Resident Evil
strong.
universe,
That's
reimagining
tough.
the
That's good.
experience for today's players. Thank you to Takeuchi-san and Capcom for that incredible
Wait, is this gonna be
news.
co-op though?
Now, some surprise breaking news from one of the
Wait,
top
what?
independent game studios
Wait.
in the world.
Surprise
What is it,
breaking
Cuphead
news.
Yeah, I'm for
The fuck is this?
Hello there.
Oh my god,
I'm
that is a
Cuphead
cup.
here at
Oh
Studio MDHR
my god, I just
headquarters.
played this last night.
And today we have a
Cuphead is
special
crazy.
announcement for all of you.
No wait. Chat,
No,
we up to date
There's
now,
no
right?
We're happy to
fucking
confirm
way,
that
bro.
development has
Where you
begun
at here? 'Cause I
on a
don't know.
brand
I
new
quit.
Oh, yeah.
hand animated Cuphead video game.
Oh my god, there's another
Our talented team
Cuphead.
has started work on this ambitious
Cuphead and
project,
Friends?
which will take Cuphead and Friends on a fresh, exciting adventure.
I never
It's
finished.
still in early
that.
stages,
I
but we look forward to revealing more when the time is
Me and
right.
Cam blitzed through
Well,
that
from all of us here at Studio NDHR, thank you for...
Oh my god,
I didn't know this
bro.
was plugged in.
This is not a series, chat. Don't do this.
Hello? Yes? Oh, indeed.
Let me know how well it does. We're gonna be a little late.
Oh, you want me to tell them? Yes, I'll tell them. Yes, right now.
All right.
Well, it seems I have one more surprise.
Is it gameplay?
Wait a minute.
A small team within our studio has been working in secret on something completely different. This new project is a love letter to the era that brought us into the world of video
Say what?
games. We have prepared a sneak peek, and I'd say it's
wrong camera.
pretty radical. Over here? Ahem. Pretty radical.
What
Yeah, I saw
the?
it.
They got gameplay.
Oh my
Now
god.
in development at
pixel.
Studio MDHR.
What is
Mighty
this?
It's Mighty Cuphead Adventure.
Oh, it's
This
four
baby
player.
shit.
Fast action platform shooter
whoa.
with arcade quality graphics
Well, some
and
Castle Crashers
amazing
shit?
sound.
Oh,
Mighty
what?
Cuphead Adventure.
Oh, this is cool.
Only from Studio MDHR.
Okay, I guess.
Okay.
That's it?
Yeah, that's kind of cool. This is good for games.
I think I'm good.
Bro, if you're a real Crashers, bro.
You know, I love my puppets. That was great. And
Play
there
games
two
like
brand
that.
new games from Studio MDHR for Canada with Mighty Cuphead
Like
Adventure,
Battle
a
Black
true
Theater
indie
and shit.
action
This is
platform
good
coming
games
on
right here, bro.
PC, and then a brand
could
new
appreciate it, though,
hand-animated
I guess.
Cuphead game
I didn't
has
even
been
see
confirmed too. Great news.
A new
All right.
hand-animated
Well, now
Cuphead
please
game is
join me in
confirmed as well.
welcoming my
Hold
co-host,
on, let me-
There's
and
two
partner in a
games.
new game discovery website called Looking for Game.
Oh, shit.
Lucy
Okay.
James, everyone.
Man, we not behind it all. We're good now, chat. Right?
So there's two games. They said there's a new hand-animated one as well. Yeah.
Thanks, Jeff. I am thrilled
Is that
to
a
be back
unicorn?
here at Summer Game Fest, and I'm excited to share in
The tattoo.
so many incredible announcements.
Oh, it's
Now, this
subtitles-
next one
subtitles
is
on or off,
very
chat? Let me know
special for
quick.
me. It's a game we've all been waiting to see
I didn't even notice
for a
that.
long time.
Oh, what the?
Yeah?
For a long time? Don't say a long time, because if it's a long time, that could mean
And I forgot about it.
that's a lot of different games, bro. Sega?
What the?
Huh? The hell is this? Creative Assembly.
大きな損失よ。
Is it?
I get that. Wait, chat, I almost heard the fluent Japanese come out, man.
こんな失態を見逃す会社ではないの。
Wait, you said Korean? No, it's not Korean.
Wait, what
これ
is
は最後の
this?
チャンスだ。
Like an alien.
I don't know, bro.
Wait, a long time in a Sega game. What the fuck?
Bro, why didn't you feel like alien, bro?
Do you understand?
Do you understand?
No.
Yes. I understand.
No!
Alien Ice?
I had to go put you back in the fucking thing.
Wow. Wow. It's another fucking alien game. Yeah.
There's Alien ISO.
Alien Isolation 2. That shit's sick.
Jeez. AI 2?
Yeah, I too. Hold on.
That new AI go crazy.
That new AI.
Wait, Tara played the first one?
Hi, I'm Al Hope,
He
creative
struggled to play the
director of
first
Alien
one.
Isolation
He
2.
beat it.
And I'm Anna Sofiko, art director of Alien Isolation 2.
Bro, last time I tried to... I'm not gonna talk about it, bro. Hey, if you know, you know.
I
On
will
behalf
play the
of the
first.
whole survival team at Creative Assembly, we're very excited to share our return to the survival horror genre.
actually-
It's been 12 years since we released the first Alien Isolation, and we're continuing what we started, creating an authentic new chapter which builds on that core isolation experience of escaping the terrifying, unkillable, relentless alien.
Yo, chat exposing
We're
you.
unleashing the alien on an unsuspecting colony
about
world.
to make this AI
From the
hear
claustrophobic
your
confines
breath
of the
through your
colony
mic.
itself
Chat
to the exposed
exposing
and
you.
storm-ravaged landscape surrounding it,
Nah, the
Kurosaki
features in this one
Station
gonna
is a
be
new
nuts.
hunting ground for the ultimate apex predator. Players will face a desperate struggle to survive and escape, and we cannot wait to show you more in the future. Thanks.
These niggas are more
This is crazy.
Oh, nah, they going crazy. I ain't gonna lie, Chad. Alien 2.
Thanks so much, Anna and Al. Today, we are honored to have one of gaming's true visionaries here with us in the audience. For more than 2 decades, his work has reminded us that games can be emotional,
Titanfall.
Star Wars Outlaws? I don't know.
from Eco to Shadow of the Colossus
Ooh,
to The Last
ooh,
Guardian.
ooh.
He
Shadow
has
of the
left
Colossus,
an
oh,
unforgettable
wow.
mark
That's
on
key games
the
right there.
I still never played that game.
Please join me in recognizing the
No way.
legendary
One day.
Fumito Ueda-san. Ueda-san, good to see you.
Gotta do that. That's good games.
You and Cam on the new
And
Cuphead.
now,
Oh, no.
let's talk about his next
Did he get
game.
on ban
A few
first?
years ago, we gave you an early glimpse into Ueda-san's next game, then
Y'all
known
are
as
so
Project
evil, bro.
Robot. Well, now, it's time to step deeper into the mysterious, unsettling, and epic world that marks Ueda's first game in a decade? Let's take a look.
First game in a decade. Oh, she got a game?
A long time, bro. Gonna be a work of art. Show me some
Epic Games Publishing.
Gotta add, better watch on YouTube, bro.
Oh shit! Oh my god!
What is about to be on some Destiny? What is these?
The original game.
You look kind of cool.
Oh, this looks so fucking good.
Oh, this looks good.
High tech.
Nothing over.
Oh, okay.
Interesting aircraft.
So, I better see Tifa today, right?
You making a fullback?
I better see Tifa today.
Okay, wait a minute.
What the fuck?
Yo.
Somebody kind of tough.
Yo.
What the hell?
Lag.
Yo, it's laggy.
Yeah, that FPS is a little bad. Oh, they doing some real still shit? Hold on. Wait, this looks crazy.
Bro, what the hell was that?
Shit. Hey, the visuals on this is crazy. Yeah, this is definitely some Shadow of the Colossus. Nah, they doing some real still shit. This nigga just knocked his head off. Come on now. Gen Atlas. Okay. I would play this. Like, this is my type of vibe.
Yeah, that's giving me Shadow of the Colossus.
Does that look incredible?
Like high tech.
All right. I cannot wait for Gen Atlas. Thank you, Ueda-san. All right. Well, next we travel to the east, to China, circa 848 AD.
Okay.
Blood Message is a cinematic single-player action-adventure game from NetEase. You are a messenger who embarks on a perilous eastward odyssey with your son.
got a lot of different games.
NetEase,
They have shitloads of games.
straight bangers.
They have so many
We're in
fucking
China.
games.
We're in China. Okay.
Oh, it's about to be a gotcha game. But they could have me.
No, this is looking. Hold on, some old China shit. I'm trying to see what it is. 4 players.
Let me see my nigga DMS Kakashi or something.
Bro,
that shit is dumb yap. Nah, this might be. Hold on, wait a minute.
Cool,
this might be some.
Still pretty cool.
I love that symbol.
河西始于吐蕃50余载，一齐奋起，却从未有人坚守如我等之久。
Cat, we still good for
I don't even need to catch.
天枪大捷，以寡破众，陪对者当即首功。
This is 4 players? Hold on. Oh.
Okay, girl, hold on. W support character.
Damn, on the horse?
Oh, I'm about that.
只要和西归堂，你不打仗，也能守住我们的家。
再不投降，全部杀光！
Wait, this the Mongols?
That's what I'm saying. Like these Mongolians, like.
Yeah, I think they are Mongolians, no? Yeah, this is they're fighting the Mongolians. Oh shit!
Hey.
Oh wait, no, they did start. Oh yeah, they're fighting the Mongolians.
Oh damn! Got that nigga through the gate.
I'm still stuck on this is 4-player co-op.
It is?
Yeah, that's what he said, did he not? I'm pretty sure it's a 4-player experience.
That was interesting.
Oh, me, I didn't hear that part.
I thought he said. It's a single player? I could have sworn he said 4.
Pretty sure he said single.
Oh, never mind.
It's a single player from
bro,
the
pass
east.
me the res, bro. I need a res.
This dude need an Elden Ring Estus, bro. Potion.
Everybody else dead. He alone.
Bro, you just be saying shit.
You
bro.
are like
blood message.
还有像安宁一样的孩子们，就再也不用怕没有家了。
Oh, you got to play as his son too?
I mean, that dude probably dies right there, no?
Yeah.
Like, did you see what he was about to just fight? Like, what?
He was fighting like 300 dudes.
Oh, hands-on preview is tomorrow. Okay. What's up, Shadi?
Now, please
You
welcome
handle
a
that,
game
man?
developer
Like,
who is
come on.
visiting the US for the first time in 2 decades. From RGG Studio, it's Masayoshi Yokoyama.
RGG? What? Oh, shit, it's here! What? I thought it wasn't gonna be
Oh, we see
here.
more of this? Okay, Cap.
Oh my god.
Right now. They
I
on the
didn't
street.
expect it to be. It was so soon.
こんにちは、横山で
This
す。
game OSTs
本
are
日
so
は
hard,
ストレンジャー
bro.
ザヘブンについて新しい発
They
表
got
が
a
ご
new
ざいます。
trailer?
まずはこちらの映像をご覧ください。
Hello everyone, this is Yokoyama. Today, we have an exciting new update about Stranger Than Heaven.
Wow.
First, please take a look at this.
Another new trailer?
Yo!
Oh, whoa, whoa.
Peace out.
アジア人ってんでのけ者にされて
They get tatted down to the cheeks.
日本じゃ毛頭扱い
Filth. Oh, we're about to learn about the villain?
何度も思ったろ
The guy that was drinking that little blood thing?
敵討ちか
The sake with blood all over it?
つまらねえことに人生使ってんだ大統領
Oh, okay.
Yakuza niggas.
この剣にけじめをつけねえと俺の人生始まらねえんだ
Snoop Dogg. Go.
Oh.
There you go, chat.
What?
Yo,
What?
I can't believe I'm watching, bro.
What the
Right to use 2 parts like me.
Drake.
We got lots to talk about, but first of all,
What is going on?
本作の発売日は2027年1月15日となります。そして先ほどのトレーラーには新しいキャストの情報が含まれていましたが、その件に関してはこの方に語ってもらいました。
Stranger Than Heaven will be released on January 15th, 2027.
Bro,
As you may have noticed in the trailer, we revealed some interesting new cast members. To tell you more about that, I'd like to bring out a special guest.
Please welcome Snoop Dogg.
Wait, oh, Snoop. Hey. Drake gonna do a performance again. That's so random.
Snoops, everyone's talking about this game.
Okay,
It's so good to have you here, man.
That's crazy.
So you teaming up with Yokoyama. Tell us, how does this happen? Why do you want to work with RGG?
I mean, I'm a big fan of Sega. I've been playing that game since it first came out, and you know, to be associated with such a great game and such a great person like this and the team that they put together, it's an amazing, feat for me. So I'm happy to be a part of it.
Now, we got to talk about what just announced in this trailer. How's Tupac being a part of it?
Snoop never ages.
You know, the Tupac estate and my son and myself, we work very closely together. So it just made sense to put him in this game because his likeness and his spirit still lives on. And I just feel like it was so connected to what we're doing. So what y'all think?
I mean, it is strange.
Game looks insane. I'm sure you got more surprises in there too. I know the song sounds great. Well, we're looking forward to hearing more on Stranger Than Heaven. I also want to ask you, though, about something a couple years ago at TGA. You and Cordell talked about Death Row Games is something that you guys want to do. Any updates on what's happening?
This guy even went to Japan before?
You
gotta make some games.
You know, we're building a hip-hop gaming universe, bringing an authentic culture to life, you know what I'm saying? And we just got a lot of plans that we're planning on actually bringing to life.
Def Jam fight for New York? A new one would be crazy. A new one would be crazy.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Snoop Dogg. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Yokoyama-san, Jamil, appreciate it. Thanks, guys. Fantastic.
Oh, shit.
A new Def Jam would be insane.
More crazy stuff to come. All right, next we're excited to announce the stunning debut title from a new studio in
like 20
Sweden.
minutes in.
Hex is an open-world action-adventure game from key creators behind The Division and Little Nightmares. You brave the wild north as researchers stranded in a mind-bending, player-shaped procedural world. This is a very cool game.
From The Division and Little Nightmares. Okay.
What the fuck?
Oh, nah. See. You got my attention, though. Hold up.
Behind The Division and Little Nightmares.
Yeah.
This sounds sick.
I ain't like it, but you got my attention, low key.
Let's have some curse. We getting cursed.
No
Anyone
such?
listening to this shit is getting cursed right now.
Okay. Yo, what's up, Cam?
Yo, what the hell, Vidal? Chill.
You're doing a summoning circle to unban Cam? Okay.
I'm about to use multiplayer.
A fucking ritual to unban Cam, alright.
What the fuck?
He's
not.
That a big ass key.
Oh, his map look kind of cool.
Yo, this looks sick.
That motherfucker got powers?
Why is it kind of live? And what time alive?
What type of first time chatter? Oh my god.
Hey X.
What? You just grow a plant?
What?
Agriculture.
That's just not how that works. So a tree grew that?
What?
Or a baby gas sapling did all this?
Why you keep looking back?
Nah.
The world is procedurally generated by
What?
Okay.
I have cracked it right there.
That looks, this looks crazy. I mean, that looks like a crazy
I
idea.
can't wait to see more from Hex. It looks absolutely
Hex, okay.
stunning. We have much more SGF to come, but first on June 14th, Dead by Daylight is celebrating its 10th anniversary. Watch this closely because here's a little tease of what's ahead.
Oh, isn't a new character?
Will I re-download this game?
Who's the new character again, chat?
Jason?
Oh, Dead by Daylight? Oh, yeah.
Wait, whoa.
Damn.
Wait.
Horror games get motion nowadays.
Wait.
It's Pennywise?
What? Pennywise? What the f... Wait.
Nah, they did that. Chat is not Pennywise.
Pennywise? I'm not gonna lie, I'm not finished with singular enemy.
Are you 3? Are you 4? Are you 5? Are you 6? Are you 7? Are you 8? Are you 9? Are you 10?
What the fuck?
I'm just assuming this is Pennywise.
You're invited.
How old are you now?
Shit, I haven't played a DVD before. Am I invited?
Like, I swear that's the same voice actor and all.
I never played a DVD. Am I invited?
What's this? What is this?
I'm good, bro.
I'm not coming. We good.
Wait, what is this? I'm paying attention. What is this? Is this another song like? What is this? Oh, Mortar Shop. Okay.
Nigga burying his ass with a guitar.
Okay. I haven't really played the first Mortar Shop.
Beta.
I've never played any of them.
Tiny build.
Oh,
That's on some Lords of the Fallen, or is it better than that?
I'm pretty sure it's better than Lords of the Fallen.
What on earth is this?
Wait, I thought this was... Well, okay, you didn't get this one. Alright, first I'm not playing this.
No, me.
You're evil.
It's a mobile banger, bro.
Not again.
I'm back. Damn, I didn't know the world was PS3.
I'm not playing this, but I mean, there's a game out there for someone.
Nah, I'm definitely going to this.
Yo, can we see Cyclops, bro? Show me Cyclops, bro.
When did the first Mortal Kombat come out? What year?
I'm not trying to wait till Tuesday. It's either we see him today or we see him on Tuesday.
Yeah,
Cyclops drops next Friday.
Duty, bro?
Oh, we can see the new Call of Duty here as well.
It, man? You hype or what?
I don't know, bro. Them niggas have me like the black, like NBA got the black niggas, bro.
What is this?
What is this?
Edward, Assassin's Creed.
Oh shit! Captain Kenway.
Black Flag remake. No.
Yeah, it's about. It is.
Oh yeah, it is.
What is it called? Re-imaged or some shit?
Something like resynced.
Yeah, resynced. This game is goated, chat. If you have never played Assassin's Creed Black Flag,
One Piece.
Best Assassin's Creed.
Yeah.
It's absolutely
I've only played a handful,
But act
and it's
according
still
to our
stood out.
own collective
Unity did
madness.
catch me a lot more.
So I'll put it to the vote.
Best Assassin's Creed.
All those in favor of storming this cove and taking this shit. Stomp and shoulder!
This right here is the
I never
blueprint for
thought I'd
all
enjoy a
shit
pirate
fighting.
game until I played this shit.
Not dead ass.
The shit fighting in this game,
Yeah, that shit is peak.
some of the best work ever done.
Do you know how many games stole the ship combat from this game?
It's ridiculous.
After you, Captain.
After you, Captain.
Oh,
No,
why am I
why is it
buffering?
buffering?
Buffer.
Bro.
Bro, like what the hell is going on?
At least it's not just us. We know it's not us.
About a 2 times speed? No, actually no, because why? We all buffered.
That's them, bro. I'm telling you, it's not us.
Damn it, replay my shit?
Assassin's Creed Black Flag resynced.
I gotta catch up. July 9th? Oh, that's pretty soon. What the fuck?
What does
Chat, y'all getting on the remake? Hey, I'll get on that.
Now
if
it's
they
time
send
to
me
game
a
to be one of
code.
the best action game developers in the world with legendary
Okay. What's this?
What is this?
But what does ring? What is a resync? What is that?
Because like you gotta, they
Like,
gotta
you know how it is
synchronize
the animus? The animus, you gotta sync it to the animus.
You gotta synchronize to
Yeah.
into the memories of the old assassins.
The fuck is this?
I missed what.
Bayonetta.
Bayonetta
Don't
and
just
Nier
type
Automata
that.
and
You can't
Gaia
just type
and
that. People
Ninja
will lose their
Turtles.
shit.
Ninja Turtles?
Oh my gosh, wait,
Oh,
no,
it is. Wait,
bro, it actually is.
Wait.
The
Am I
fucking
from it?
sewer.
I just wait, they say something about
Wait, the game is actually coming? I thought they canceled it.
Why are you spamming Bayonetta? Like you just saw that it. Yeah.
So I saw the sign.
Oh my god, please got canceled.
They said something about that.
No, they said it was canceled, no?
I don't remember them ever saying it was ever canceled. No.
I could have sworn I heard it was canceled.
No. It's about that time.
No. It was for sure canceled.
Kind of hard.
All right, well, that's another
Nah, I'm looking it up.
game from Platinum Games.
Bro, is that my nigga? Is that Mikey?
Now, please
Wait, you don't know
welcome
you ain't never read it?
TGA
No, I didn't
loser
read it.
For Expedition 33
don't
and
even-
Final
don't even-
Fantasy
I think
16.
I low-key might
It's
know
Ben
the lore. I
Starr,
just don't
who
wanna
voices
say
the
it.
visitor in Fortnite.
Why the fuck is Ben Starr here? He said Final Fantasy 8. My hair turned so fast. Yeah, it was canceled. The movie got canceled and
the movie.
the book as well.
I didn't know that.
He
I
said
didn't know
on
that.
Fortnite?
They're about to have a
He voices a character in Fortnite.
For the past little while, I have had the incredible opportunity to step into the world of Fortnite as the visitor. And today,
Wait, he's the visitor?
I finally get to share a glimpse of where that journey
I don't know no Fortnite
is
world.
heading next.
Somebody out of Fortnite.
We've been working on this for a long time. A new season is about to begin, and everything is
14.99.
about to change. Let me show you what's coming in Fortnite's next season
y'all said me on
runners,
Fortnite, bro, tell the
launching
truth.
later tonight.
Okay.
I mean, they have unlimited money. I'm not surprised they're here. Like, is anyone surprised they're here? This is tonight?
I mean, we gonna see them.
The hunt for power breeds
Runners. Chapter 7, Season 3. If they didn't do chapters, they'd probably be on like season like fucking 6, 7 by now. I swear to God.
creatures born from 0-point energy. They can make you stronger.
What?
Faster. More dangerous.
This
What
baby
is
ass
this,
man. What the fuck am I looking at?
I don't know. This is Fortnite though. Bro, you get surprised, bro.
We must
What are those tiny thingies?
What these baby ass chibi lumps,
If
bro?
nigga hit me with that, I'm close to the game, man. That's like ricochet off.
Why is there chibis on the game?
It gives you powers? So what does it do?
Bad TV.
John Wick? Oh, that new John Wick skin is hard. Hold on. What is that sliding bullshit?
Oh my
What
God,
is
I'm
that?
buffering. No,
yeah, I'm
don't do
buffering
that.
too.
Oh, I
Don't
see
do that
John
to
Wick.
me.
It's like
They
a
stole that-
refresh version of it.
They stole it. They stole
remade the John
it.
Wick skin.
I remember everybody used to want that John Wick.
Nah,
skin,
this
bro.
new one is
Oh my
hard. What the
God.
hell? The lighting on it is sick.
They got that better one.
Okay, that's cool.
Might have to swap the Twitch, but the Twitch is that skin is sick. If I
What
still
the
played, I'd get that.
yo.
The Twitch is in 720p capped. I can't watch on Twitch. That shit is us.
Now,
Son, I'm not watching in
if you're wondering how we
720p.
end up on this new island, you'll have to jump
Wait,
into the
is he
Shattered event
desynced or am I
happening live inside Fortnite right after
It is.
Summer Game
It's
Fest.
them. It's not
This
us.
season, we asked every player to choose a side, and in light of a natural changing experience, it's all been building to this moment. Party starts at 7 p.m. Eastern time, the doors open early, and trust me,
Them niggas are getting hacked.
you'll want to stay to the very end of the event. I've got a little surprise waiting
You got some
for you.
Xenoverse for me?
Oh my God.
Audio and everything is decent.
Oh, they gotta fix that. That's pretty bad.
You chose your side.
Hey, audio team, jump up. What's going on, y'all?
Don't tweet right now.
This ends now.
Bro, seeing The Rock on my screen
Why
is
did they
so
get a
crazy.
whole 2
It's the equivalent of a scene.
I ain't gonna lie, nah, that's
Bro,
crazy.
you know they get a long ass
segments.
time, bro.
Now it's time for a
no,
special
even
announcement
hers?
from Bandai Namco
Huh?
about one of the
Bandai
most
Namco?
influential
Bandai!
sci-fi franchises ever created.
Come on, man.
Mankind measured time by
This better be a
seasons,
banger.
not sirens.
Hold on. Let me see it.
For a moment, the future felt promising.
It better be a banger.
Out here, that promise is a lie.
Bro, the audio is fucking.
The audio
Who that
is
is?
fried.
Hold on. Whoa, what I do? Wait a minute. Killer
Who is
beam.
this?
What's up? What's up?
This Asane Miku cousin. I don't know who I'm
What's
looking
up?
for.
This audio is so poorly decent.
The audio!
I can't take this seriously, but it does look sick.
Damn! I ain't like liquid
Gundam.
Every breath taken is inside an armored shell.
Just imagine how much harder this would hit if the audio.
Wait, that is Gundam, nigga.
Nah, that's on me. That's a Gundam. That's not hard. What just happened?
Why did it just back?
Bro, did it happen to you too?
Oh my.
Bro, this shit, out of all the state of plays, I mean not state of plays, some of the games we've ever watched, this is the most decent ever.
The pilot.
Ooh, that gameplay.
I feel like
Games
this
that look hard though.
Ooh, the gameplay.
But like,
I don't usually
this is the most
The
decent.
gameplay is 2 times hard.
Hold on!
Shit, hold on, the nigga came out the gun.
Here, let's try this
Got
on.
perfect dashes. Oh, I might. Oh my god.
That's hard. Are we synced up again? There we go.
Are we?
We good.
Find me.
That's supposed to be us.
I'm here.
Oh, they resynced it?
Yeah, I'm synced again.
Thousands of games launched every year, so finding your next favorite can be tough. That's why I'm launching my new newsletter, Looking for Game. Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
I'll be curating and selecting games that deserve your attention every week and sending
Nah,
demos
bro, I
and
watch what it
exclusive
like. I'm not watching the
playtest
720.
invites straight to your inbox. Head over to lookingfor.game
gosh.
to
I'm
sign
on-
up
I'm on
with
Fortnite.
I heard that
code.gg.
sub sound effect when Love You,
Speaking
but
of
thank you.
fun, unexpected games,
yeah,
this
okay.
next title
Okay,
comes from a
Proceed
solo developer,
hell no.
Adrian Mulero from Spain.
Yo,
It is
imagine
a
the day a
co-op physics
Roblox
game
game
about
gets up
two
on this
geese
stage, bro.
and one very
Oh my
fragile
God.
egg.
I would love.
I think we've seen doors on one of these before.
Okay, Mookie, ready
Oh,
to be a
wait.
Sure.
No,
Oh,
play
this
this.
is like that.
This is
Hold
a
on,
piece
this
of
is
game.
like Octodad and shit like that.
Be careful, be
Oh
careful
my
with our
God.
little baby.
Don't drop it. Don't drop it.
Oh,
What's that
Hold
one
on.
game? I swear it's a literal game called Goose Game.
Friend
It's just
swap?
like this.
Yo,
some
can
friend
you say
swap.
anything
Yeah, it's like a
friend
glass
swap?
game.
Be careful with our little baby.
Don't
What
drop
the
it. Don't
fuck?
drop it.
Yo, the buffer is old.
Yo, the buffer is OD, bro.
Are you buffering? I'm not gonna lie, this is the first one on this.
Niggas say anything is friend swap.
This is a
This
good
human
one.
fall flat, bro.
Are you listening to me?
This is girlfriend swap.
This is friend swap, though.
this?
Bro, this is made by the
You
people that
need
made
this
the
type
glass
of game
game,
to
no?
play with the girl,
It looks
bro.
exactly like it. The models and stuff
Nah,
are the
this
same.
is literally not friend swap. Like, what the fuck?
Out of that, your homies.
Oh gosh, that looks really hard. Maybe
This is a game you
if
play
we
with the
look for
host.
some more people, it would be easier.
All right, what you trying to play? Let me stop.
This really is an extremely hard game.
Congrats, Adrian. What a fun game. All right, now it is time for a debut
But why you
game
not-
from
why
a
you never
veteran
spawn?
team of developers who come from Naughty
That
Dog
nigga's
and
thinking
Infinity Ward and
about
other
it.
amazing studios.
No!
For the past half-decade, they've quietly been working on
Why
an
you
ambitious
not
new
spawn, though?
project. Here is the global announcement.
He was making fun of the game until somebody asked him.
Like,
He was making fun of the game, but when somebody asked him, he confused.
Okay, so you want to play the game?
He was making fun of the game until somebody asked him, though.
What's that?
Yeah, they nobody would ask him.
Yeah, that BC is flamboyant, bro. Like,
They're bullies.
Huh?
That's dogs.
Oh, she's caught her. What is this?
what?
So that's
Oh,
what I
she
say
mad.
when I look at
Bro,
someone.
what is it? Tom Clancy?
Bully.
Special?
Oh yeah, she definitely Latina.
See, that's
Bro.
what
What?
I'm really like most people.
My fault.
Oh, well, then you're truly a sick fuck.
Splinter Cell? Could be. I don't know.
I'm saying it look like a Splinter.
They both look hella.
Come on.
We need them.
That means they did a good
I'll be
job.
coming for you.
Coming for us.
I think they're both actors.
You're not one of them anymore.
It's just like the girl from The Boys.
She does look like the girl from The Boys.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, that's temporary.
Probably the same model.
Just like you and
They
me.
probably used the model of the character.
You guys
Y'all
don't
can go
understand the
invisible.
threat.
This looks good.
Not like we do.
This looks really good. This looks good.
What the hell y'all searching for?
That gunplay though is fucking.
Need to survive.
What is that?
For now.
Why is there so much?
Symbiote?
Either we
Wait, what? Wait, what? Wait, 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 wait. Wait, what just happened?
will die alone.
Oh, nah.
Wait.
No. Do not touch him.
Okay. Oh.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
They got
What the fuck is happening?
What the fuck? That is a failed super soldier serum if I've ever seen it.
Together.
shit that they had in Iron Man 3.
They was trying to make Captain America.
That fire
I'm
shit.
saying.
Oh shit, yeah.
What the fuck am I looking at?
What the fuck?
Well, these visuals are crazy though.
Title, y'all.
Crossfire, that generic ass name. Okay.
Crossfire. That shit is
That shit hard though.
I'm saying
Yeah, that shit was hard though. No?
For over 18 years, Jacob and I have developed character-driven games with the goal of thoroughly connecting design and story.
Wait, is his name actually
In Crossfire, two opposing operators
Kurosaki?
must
Oh my
form
God.
a temporary
No,
alliance.
that's
Depending
a tough
on one
This
another
guy.
is their only chance of survival.
Nah, he changed his name. Ain't no
To
way.
support this narrative,
Ain't no way.
rethought
He
how
changed his
cover
name.
and traversal work together
No, he did.
and created a system
He had
that
to
rewards
change his name. I'm not buying it.
stealth and repositioning. It's called adaptive cover. With adaptive cover, our player character Layla dynamically adjusts her stance to react to the complex terrain and the enemy's line of sight. It fundamentally changes your relationship with the environment and becomes an active skill to master.
That trailer did what it was supposed
Shout
to do.
out to our amazing team at That's No Moon, who are meticulously crafting Crossfire. It's for all of you who, like us,
also has this
love
collar pop,
high
like,
agency,
fucking-
single-player, story-driven games.
That boy got that.
Thank you.
That's a good looking game though.
You're never
Overall,
gonna
the
get a nigga
undershirt.
like CG4 proning in a game like this. Like that's never happening.
Amazing. Thank you so
Gears
much,
Award
Jacob
did
and
it first.
Taylor.
It's
Now, last
crazy.
year at the Game Awards, we introduced the next game from Remedy Entertainment.
That
Here's a
beard
new
looks
look at the
racist.
mind-bending
Oh, wow.
Control. You know, I tried my hardest to play Control. I really did. I can't play that game. That game is trash.
I'm behind.
I got it for free off of Epic.
I really have tried my hardest to play Control.
He's now loose in the streets, man.
Can't get into it.
We just saw this last direct though. Oh, damn.
This was caused by a new type of hostile resonance. It is beyond anything that we can
They got
currently
Monday put it
measure.
in both presentations.
What the fuck?
It's all quite terrifying.
Hell no. That's some powerful.
And
I feel like I like this type of gameplay. Like,
wait, why is it a guy now? I haven't seen that.
It's a new character. Yeah, it's two.
Whoa, this is copyright. Hold on, slow that down.
Is it?
Slow that down. Oh, this YouTube VOD is getting saved. I cannot have that.
What is going on?
Slow that down.
Video, bro.
Slow that down completely.
What is happening?
Bro, when I first played Control, I still had zero clue what the hell was happening.
What's going on, bro?
Let me know when it's done.
I don't know this game.
Hey.
Oh my god, they're still going.
Yeah, it's still going.
Yo, can I see the Street Fighter 6
what's going on
characters,
with
please?
He just got the force.
Yeah, where is the Street Fighter characters, bro? Show me it.
Yeah, this is pretty yappy. I'm not lying.
What do you think it's gonna be, Lomo?
Ooh, Street Fighter characters.
Show me Vega, and I'll get back on.
I think it might be Vega.
Vega would be pretty.
I think
Vega's an only character.
Vega's gotta be in
Goken,
every.
and like.
Ooh, Vega,
know.
Goken.
The rumors that it's
maybe
Vega,
Seth,
Goken.
because they usually be adding some weird ass characters, so maybe Seth.
Only nigga I need to see, bro.
The rumor is Vega, Goken, Mike, and Tifa, but we'll see.
Tifa? Right. Wait, you said Tifa?
Yeah,
Please,
Lockhart.
Bro.
Yeah.
Yeah, please.
We all have our own reasons for coming to this.
Bro, the sound, I had it muted because it was copyright, you idiot.
Yeah, you got it.
But for our guild, we who protect this land.
Unravel?
What is this?
One reason stands above all.
Yo, I appreciate all the subs, guys. I have alerts muted though.
Our wonder. You feel it too.
Nah, it's not Fable.
Nah,
Fable's
there's no
an
way
Xbox
it's
game.
Fable.
That's an Xbox game. That wouldn't be here. And Fable got delayed.
Astonishing power that shapes this land
Fable is hard.
of awe.
I've never played Fable.
You've never played a Fable game? Oh my god.
That's one of them ones I had to play on.
I already know how you play it too.
Who holds dominion over all.
You can be good or evil. You can get a whole wife and stuff.
Oh yeah.
We cannot guarantee your comfort.
I know how you play a Fable.
Yeah, we know what you're doing.
And like your decisions affect the story.
Yearn for horizons unexplored.
I already know how you play that game.
For fellowship and purpose.
You should.
For a cause worth dying for. To you, we can promise.
Like you can kill like anyone in that game too.
Magic.
Like your family members and shit too.
Wait, you can do all that in Fable?
Yeah, and it affects the story and stuff.
Ooh, Sleep Wars 3, let's go.
Here.
Nigga, that don't say guild.
This guy is an asshole. This guy is an asshole, bro.
To everyone watching both here and live online around the world, I'm Colin Johansson, the studio head at ArenaNet, and I want to thank you for watching the exclusive first look at our upcoming game. The time is right for the next evolution of the MMORPG, and that game
there's only been a
is
Guild Wars 2.
3.
This is new. I haven't played Guild Wars
Glad you all agree.
in ages.
Guild Wars 3 is an epic world that is both beautiful and fun to explore, where the joy of movement is powered by your character's momentum.
Persona's
and
not gonna be
combat
here. That's gonna
will
be an
usher in
Xbox
an
presentation.
entirely new type of MMO experience.
What?
By launching on PC and PlayStation 5, we're inviting the biggest audience yet to experience the world of Guild Wars.
I'm actually hoping to see some.
We're so excited to welcome all of you to join our Guild Wars community. Go to guildwars3.com to sign up for our newsletter right now. Thank you.
W Guild Wars, bitch.
Whoa.
Thanks, Colin. Get ready to blast across the galaxy with daring races, dangerous rivals, and some very familiar faces.
Okay.
Star Wars Galactic
Star Wars
Racer
Racing?
is coming this October.
October.
And now it's
Oh,
time
Star
to
Wars.
head
Galactic
to
Racing.
the planet Divinacos. Now
They said
this
code, I'm getting
is pod racing.
Is it free?
I'll pull up. They send me a code.
Okay, you can buy it for us.
You richer than
Hey,
me.
me and all the homies will get on with if you get me a code.
Hell
man.
no.
We're champions.
Hey, I make $5 a month.
Born.
Wait, did I miss Resident Evil?
And
Yeah, it was the first game they showed. That's why. It was the intro game. It was an RE5 remake.
I hope
it's
I'm not racing
though.
on no Star Wars game, bro.
Making friends.
Most racing I've ever done was on the Lego Star Wars.
I guess
Complete
they're gonna
Saga.
remake 6 too as well.
Racers don't go head to head against football,
That
but
like what Star Wars
legends do.
That shit was hard.
They are
That
not.
right there was the most racing I've ever done for Star Wars.
Cast our side.
So what? It's got a story mode. How are we watching
Oh,
cutscenes?
this is the dream shape.
Anything but racing. There we go.
Oh, literally.
Can I use the force while I'm on the bike? Talk to me, man.
Oh my god, the buffer. Oh my god, bro. Jeff fucking Keeley, bro. Lock in, man.
Bro, for me to 3 times speed, I need to have premium. That would be too much.
Game look fun.
Can I use Vader? Frick no. You a regular stormtrooper on a bike. I was just trying to ask, bro. Like, I could use a force. That would have been kind of cool.
How much is it?
Right?
I would like to say this is gonna be like $40.
Oh, Section 9 interactive. Don't you? Oh.
I thought you said Section 8. I was gonna be like, what? I dead ass thought he said Section 8. I'm like, what? Like, why did he say that?
Yo, leave the company too.
I was about to say,
Yeah, I'm
that was kilo. I'm like,
one of them
what?
End of Abyss.
Alright.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I didn't even watch that, bro. That AFK. That was my last game fire.
What is this, Raft?
Yep. Raft 4.
Oh, brother.
Yep, oh, and they got Blitz.
Raft 2? You building rafts?
Okay.
That's goofy, I ain't gonna lie. That's goofy.
Why did he run like that?
He's animation or something. Last hard.
Wow.
Okay.
Hey, my boy Keo with the sub. Love you, bro. Thank you. Thank you.
A few years ago, we announced Sega's plans to bring back many of its classic franchises, Jet Radio and Crazy Taxi. Another one is Virtual Fighter.
Oh,
Today we've got your first ever look at the surprising
Fighter
scale and scope of the next installment.
Let me see this. They be throwing hands.
Is Virtual Fighter Crossroads.
Oh, the name is officially Crossroads.
Oh, Crossroads.
It's an open world? Hold on, show me something.
No, they be fighting like it's an actual fucking
Yeah,
fight.
they be using the environment and shit. Oh, fucking copyright, bro. Fuck, I want to see this. I'm gonna leave it. I'll leave it. Fuck, I'll take the copyright. Oh shit. Oh. Ooh. RGG Studio. Wait, so can I see Majima? You see Kiryu or something?
Wait, they kind of going crazy.
They showing some characters, no?
Hey, I've got an idea for you.
Hey, Cielo. Bet you're hungry after this morning, huh? Same as usual?
Is the audio decent?
Taking this whole job thing seriously, huh, Divina?
That shit is decent. Oh, the
Cammy? Oh, Cammy!
That is not Cammy.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be living in Villa Sapara.
We can actually get like a Yakuza character in this game. This is RGG.
Kill them all. Hey, it's me.
Oh, the audio desync is ass.
Yeah, the desync is crazy.
Oh wait, there's actually some open world shit?
This is not gonna blow over, Cielo. You fucked with the Chinese mafia.
Or is it not the Virtual Fighter fighting game, or is it like an actual different game? I'm pretty sure it's a fighting game, though.
Wait.
This might be their open world game, I think.
Oh.
This might be their story game.
Hang on.
They're making a story game?
One more move and I'll
Unless this is a story mode.
All right, just take it easy.
Can I 2 times this, bro?
This audio is so desynced.
Oh, Chun-Li!
Son.
That's your
You're Chun-Li? Gosh. Ooh, that back all the way open. Ooh, that hairline's luscious.
You are.
You are lacking in kung fu.
Over the cries,
Virtual fighter. Crosswalk. So is this the game name or the story mode? Like,
once you're inside, there's no
wait, what type of racist shit did he just say, man?
There was nothing racist.
Nah, that nigga started making fucking kung fu.
Bro, I'm saying his kung fu.
Okay.
You said you like kung fu?
I see. No, that's 20 years tomorrow that Duriel 321 wreaked havoc in Falador. Finally, this legendary universe is coming to console with RuneScape Dragon Wilds, playable now on PC and early access.
Playable. Some more RuneScape shit?
Yeah, bro. Very slim chances, y'all.
This don't look like no fucking RuneScape. Wait, this is a RuneScape?
Maybe
Few survive the land of dragons.
This is Roblox Bandibeater!
But some seek more than survival.
This is RuneScape?
They fight.
They
attack.
Unreal
They
Engine
build.
6, bro, come on.
They stride boldly into the unknown. Claiming dominion.
See the armor combo?
And forging
Not at all.
their legend.
I'm not. This shit is very quiet to me. I'm not seeing it. You ready, Landis?
Oh, man. The Aladdin carpet?
Most people not gonna like this. Old school RuneScape players ain't gonna like this.
My God, this is like.
I don't think the old school RuneScape lovers gonna love this.
Like, I would not play no RuneScape game like this.
That's just
Where's their fucking directs?
Wait, how do we get here?
Oh, that's not one game that.
This makes me think Nintendo Direct is soon if they're announcing.
Hey, Orbitals look pretty cool though.
Yeah, this game is sick.
That game looks.
Why is this here?
I don't know.
This makes me think Nintendo. We haven't had a Nintendo Direct in 8 months, by the way.
It actually has been a long time. Yeah.
It's been 8 months.
Yeah, bro, cool. Xenoverse time.
In ebbing spring,
Forza? I said Forza. Am I fucking stupid? I mean, Horizon.
skies
Wait, what
will
the fuck is this?
Now I see why you said this was like Horizon though.
our shedding seeds made piles of rot. Odions cast with tempers
Why she
rare.
kick the cage with the little baby deer?
Red minnows squirm in tainted
Like kick. Not that bad of a kick.
3 virtues.
Wait, I see
This look more smooth than RuneScape has.
Not all we
What is
cast.
this?
For wrath and doom.
I'm not gonna lie, yeah.
Oh, it's
Death.
Wait, can you already? Yeah, someone does can you already play this? You
Alas,
can already play this.
Man, if I be DLC or something.
fall, or I'll find you.
Nah, it's just in pre-alpha.
Oh, chat's actually played this?
Yeah,
So
you
freaking
can already
fire.
play this.
They put
I
this
did
shit
actually
right
never
after
heard.
just to shit on
I see.
Welcome to
Just a
Brook
direct
Hollow
upgrade, bro.
right.
It's okay, they're not actually
What
monsters.
the hell?
We're just
We still
a
dropping
lot smaller now.
What's this shit called? Garden or something?
girl.
I don't know what this shit called.
Is the audio out of sync
Looking at a
again?
living fossil.
I don't think it's
Grounded.
guys,
Grounded.
you're gonna
I
wanna
guess
see
grounded.
For 3? Which one is it?
Nah, this might be
Tell me
3.
that
I
was your
swear they already dropped 2.
Probably 3 then.
Hold on to your buggies
That's just some
for a
2 DLC.
survival epic
They must be sounding like
65
crazy then.
millimeters in the making.
Genuinely, if this is 3, I'm gonna be so
What the hell did we get ourselves into?
A new game for me to play. I don't know about that. I got too much on my plate right now. Oh, it is 2.
Yeah, I'm yawning and shit, bro.
SBZ game night? I'll pass. They got it though. Like,
Into the abyss.
Yeah, we're gonna just wait till that until dawn.
y'all can do
They
that.
said they got it though. Like we going.
Fuck is this?
Alright.
Some guys
Budget
leave it
increase
to
talking.
luck. let it ride.
Some random ass shit on Ram leading to a Street Fighter trailer like last year. Remember the Kenny Omega shit? That was so random.
Not me.
The locker room thing.
You can have all the luck in the world.
That locker room shit.
But what matters
Out of nowhere, it was actually Street
is
Fighter.
the choice you make
Could be Mafia.
when the cards are on the table.
Oh,
No, it is Mafia.
Man of Honor. Story, okay. Oh, wait, story expansion? This is already in game?
Yeah. It got announced like 2 years ago.
Okay.
Yes, that was indeed a young
Oh,
Don Salieri from the original
audio
Mafia.
desync.
Man of Honor expands Enzo's journey in Mafia: The Old Country this August.
Ass.
Okay, can you imagine working on something for 16 years of your life?
GTA 6?
Back in
I'm joking.
2010, the creator of Assassin's Creed set out on a journey to build his next
16 years in development. Hold on.
time-bending epic. Today, after many twists and turns, it is finally time for Patrice Désilets to invite you in to his new world.
What?
Son,
I'm at a 2x speed.
I can't read that.
I was born to be the
You were
collector,
born to be the collector.
to protect a world I cannot be a part of,
Okay.
destined to be feared for what I am.
That bread look good, bro.
It
It's
is
just
my fate.
plain old ass bread.
Oh,
whoa. What was she wearing? Whoa.
I have devoted my life.
Why was it white?
I will. Those granted the power
This
to
looks
raise
sick.
souls.
The
Those
power to erase souls.
corrupted by their gifts,
Oh my god, this looks crazy.
tilting the ancient balance.
Save the witch trials. What the fuck was that? Okay, this game looks sick. Yo, this chick is going crazy. What was that?
They actually kind of getting my attention.
This is something that's on the list.
Yo, she going crazy. Oh, nah, the witch trials. We get a witchcraft game? That's kind of sick.
Those outfits are tough.
Every choice, every breath
Oh, this
has
is
led
cinema.
me to this
You
moment.
get them,
As the moon bears witness, I take the first step. My time has come.
Let's see some gameplay. Come on, lock
I'm
in.
ready.
Oh, don't buff
Bro.
Brad with the beat was about to drop too. Come on, bro.
Oh. But we saw hints of gameplay. They shoot like a witch Assassin's Creed type shit.
1666 Amsterdam.
He was going crazy.
1666.
Thank you, Jeff.
Oh,
Yeah,
Thank you, everyone.
maybe I don't play
1666
this.
Shit,
has
I'm
been a
playing this shit. You
monumental
Just
and
don't
emotional
like this
journey. David Lynch
I'm
once
definitely-
said,
My grandma would
"The
whoop
film
my ass.
is
I'll watch
the
Con play
talking."
this one. I'll
That's
watch
how
Con
I
play
feel
this one.
today about the game. Instead of explaining features, I'll simply say this. As of right now, the
What?
prologue is free to download
prologue?
on Steam
Okay, I'm about to
and
play-
Epic
Wow.
Games
I
Store.
watched Con play, you know what I'm saying? Con and Milk play.
Interesting. Well, but we didn't even
It's
see
a
gameplay.
30-minute story experience.
This is-
Oh, it's 30
bullshit.
minutes of the
Demo
story.
right
Never
now?
mind.
I'll leave you with a glimpse of what's to come when the game launches on early access
Play this
later
shit, I
this
got
year.
you, Lee.
Join
It's
us
only
for
30
the journey.
minutes of story. Never
Merci
mind.
think I'm good,
and Panache
bruh.
Galis.
Y'all like showed barely any gameplay though.
Wait, no, they're showing gameplay again.
Oh.
Wait, you can play as a
Okay,
cat?
let's see it. No, I think she transformed into a cat.
Oh, that's sick. Nah, I can tell this is made
Oh,
by
she's moving different. Oh shit.
Oh,
shit.
Nah, the outfits are so crazy. I love these outfits.
This bitch crazy.
Yeah, I'm playing. I
Let
gotta
me find out the gameplay.
They haven't showed enough, bro. I need to see more gameplay than that.
Thank you,
Like you had
Patrice.
some combos.
Still to come, we've got a lot of great announcements for you, including a
Jigsaw?
special
Is that a
surprise
comic?
guest.
What?
Fuck is it?
Jigsaw.
Oh hell no.
Wait, that's Billy from Saw?
Yo, if the fucking tricycle
Hey,
breaks
Billy.
down, I'd
Wait,
cry.
let me hear this.
Hello.
Saw Genesis.
Oh, you want to play a game? That's great. We're here at Summer Game Fest. This is all about
I would
playing games.
play a,
Perfect.
Friend slop saw.
Oh, yeah. That shit is buzzwords.
Puppet. Roll the tape.
I hit all of them.
Okay.
That might dead ass you with the info. I feel like you're right.
You know, nigga?
100 years have passed
Ew, what is that?
since the genesis of your legacy.
And
They call
oh
you
my
a
god.
monster. But I call you
a prophet. Pain
Another
is
game that I
our
gotta play.
only true path to redemption.
Oh, well, actually, let me see gameplay
It strips away the lies
Look
that people
this,
tell
bro.
themselves. Only then do they get to see
That is disgusting.
Damn.
makes them
Jesus.
a sacrifice must
Okay,
always
there goes the.
Oh, this is the same dude right here.
be paid in blood.
What the
Live or die.
Ooh, wait, why is Jigsaw bad now?
Let's see him like that by there.
Okay, this looks like some Outlast shit. Oh my god!
Whoa.
Yo, that's disgusting.
Yeah.
He marked it with his finger.
Nah.
Crazy, bro.
Inspires those who
I don't think there's enough
are
action to
worthy.
justify the disgustingness I'm seeing like that other game, like the ill game. The ill game looks sick. This is just fucking gross.
Bleeds ever deeper.
My channel would get striked to oblivion if I upload this.
Oh, Terra's Dead by Daylight, bro.
This is not Lords of the Fallen.
No, please, no, please, 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 no.
I know this isn't Lords of the Fallen.
No,
Is this actually Lords of the Fallen?
please,
No, it ain't, bro.
no. This game is ass, bro.
It is.
Please.
It actually is. It did ass it.
I'm playing another one, bro. That game was so bad, bro.
Well, Terry, we gotta go back and finish the game, bro.
They could redeem themselves.
I didn't finish
They
it.
could.
I finished it.
No,
Okay.
we couldn't.
Nah, we dueled and it was just a
played it,
laggy,
and that
buggy
It was like
ass.
3 bosses before the final boss.
So it's like a Souls-like game, chat, but it's co-op. So we like, I played with Cam, he played with Tara.
Played with
Yeah.
Yeah, this game was hella buggy, bro. Like,
It was
the first one was
buggy mess.
It was fun, but it was buggy as shit. And a lot of enemies was crazy. What the fuck is
Bro, I
that?
hate to be the nigga to not play a Souls game, bro. Like, this is crazy.
It's real cool, though.
Lords of the Fallen 2
looks
wish
crazy.
list.
Oh, no, I'm good.
He
I
said
just
better.
haven't-
Yeah, they probably locked in for the second one. We'll see. We'll see.
Wait, why is it
That's
called
right,
2?
Lords of
Wasn't
the
it?
Fallen 2 is also coming to
Well, it
Steam
is 2.
this fall.
The first one was just
Next
Nah,
up
sync
is
back
a
up.
brand new game
Y'all
from
not sync back up,
BitReactor,
sync your shit
a
back.
studio
They-
formed
they-
by
they
some
knew
of
they
the
sold on
most
the first one.
experienced developers in the
That was a
tactic genre.
buggy mess.
This is
Wait,
Star
whoa,
Wars
Star Wars Zero
Company.
Company? Hold on, is this an actual game? Never mind. I lied.
Intelligence was just briefed of Separatist fleet massing in the Cerebrona system.
I never played Lords of the Fallen. We'll probably play this.
Wait, hold on. Hold on, wait a minute. Let me shut up. Let me shut up.
It's about to be on some Battlefront.
Zero Company.
Wait, what is this?
Port Zilius.
Oh, that frame rate is.
Coil's been spotted
Oh
meeting
my
with local
God.
gangsters.
That frame
Find out what
rate,
they're
yeah.
up to.
I've been tracking Fathom for months.
Wait, can I see some real gameplay though? Like, come on.
Nope.
All right, let's get a team together.
Oh, yeah. I already knew, bro. I already knew.
You better leave this one alone, bro.
What? Nah. I already knew, bro.
We leave this one alone,
As
bro.
soon as I said, let me see some gameplay, it's not real deal. See, this is that Midnight Sun shit. Nah, this is that Midnight Sun shit. I'm over here thinking it's about to be peak game.
I love turn-based games.
That shit is in 30 FPS, bro.
Get this shit off my screen.
I like turn-based, but like this is 30 FPS.
We're better for it.
Also, Fire Emblem better.
Almost
Oh,
there.
bro.
Even then, Fire Emblem is
gotta
just,
finish this job.
it's cool. If y'all made a Naruto version, though, I want that day one.
This guy.
Like, not even Naruto can save this game.
Oh, what the hell? Why the hell is Anakin? Okay.
Oh my god, they showed Anakin. Yes, I'm gonna buy it now.
Yeah, I mean,
All right. Yeah, no, you can handle
A
this
little
one.
surprise at the
Nah,
end
that's
there, all right?
definitely what
Dark
they wanna do
fantasy has
reaction to,
always
bro.
been about one
Right?
thing, the monster within. And today, one of Europe's most ambitious studios is ready to take you into a brutal new world where vampires have emerged from hiding.
Okay.
I didn't mean to do that.
Come
I just
in.
fucked up.
Oh, a nigga.
Yo,
Oh my
turn around,
goodness.
bro, before you set us back to it.
Let's see what he does.
Is it the Blade game? No way.
The box.
Maybe.
Please.
Actually,
But what did he say it was?
Yeah.
No.
A world where vampires, something.
It could be the Blade game.
I'm good.
Yo, Blood Hunt 2 would be crazy.
It looks good too.
Wait, what the fuck is that?
What is this?
Oh.
Wait a minute.
Alright, bro. Pick the feet up.
The fuck?
Wait, he just hold on some vampire shit. Hold on, wait a minute.
What was that? What the? That vampire BR game we played with Blood Hunt, right?
Yeah,
Neither do I.
This is Morbius?
You certainly have reasons to hate me. My son, you've ruined my life. We crave the same
The Twilight game.
Wait, he's a knight. Wait, he's a knight now?
He's a knight and a vampire. I don't know.
Am I evil?
I thought we were just a modern
They
time.
adore me. You're a pawn in Brentice's hand.
Yeah, I
Nothing
thought we
more.
were just literally a modern time.
I don't know, bro. Thought we were too, but I guess not.
I've done the unthinkable for my own family.
Damn, they could have cooked.
Okay. That's kind of cool.
See what they talking about. Damn.
Okay. Shadow of Mordor type shit.
Determination is not enough to defeat your fate, Dawnwalker.
Damn.
Okay. This is not bad.
How many innocents
like that
Men and monsters.
Share.
Maybe we are different after all.
You're gonna be sucking everybody, okay?
Oh, okay. Yeah, you can have this then. This is for you.
Wow, bro.
It's perfect for you then.
Okay, sure, go ahead, bro. Go back up to me.
Hello, everyone. Right there.
My name is Konrad Tomaszkiewicz, and I'm the game director of The Blood of Dawnwalker. What you just saw was an invitation to join us on an adventure.
We'll see about the gameplay.
To eras and cultures in our story-driven, open-world dark fantasy cycle. CGI shows where our saga leads to, a present-day adventure. The gameplay segment that followed is from our current game, and it's an origin story of Cohen. I hope you will have as much fun playing our game as we had making it. Thank you, and have a great rest of the show.
Deepoken has Dawnwalker with the red tattoos.
Thanks, Conrad.
Wow,
Next,
your
the
mouth is
creators of
yappy.
Among Us have been hard at work on a new
I'll
project.
say he wasn't.
And today
he
we're
wasn't
revealing
wrong,
it for the first time.
I didn't even get to hear what she said. Oh,
All I heard was a nigga screaming in the back. What is this?
Among Us.
I don't
care.
You sus?
Standalone game.
Yeah, GG's, bro. Trying to do the branch off.
Give it up.
Finally time, bro. Oh my gosh, first person gameplay.
Wrap it up, bro. It's over.
From the Among Us TV series, please welcome Yvette Nicole Brown and Liv Hewson.
Jesus Christ.
They got a TV stream.
Yeah, you 20 if you do a stream wearing that.
Summer Game Fest!
So I need 20 gifts if you do a stream wearing that.
It is.
So excited about this.
Where do you even get one of those? Party City?
Crew members are
I swear to God, I
so
fucking
sarcastic,
know.
sharing even
No,
more news
no,
about
she's
the
in.
animated series.
She is in Drake and Josh, no?
She's in Drake and Josh.
Yvette?
She's in a lot of shit.
Oh my gosh, wait.
Look, I know fans
see
have
her,
been
right?
dying for updates, but
okay.
there's a
Check
dead
it out.
body
Check it
right
out.
there.
Dudes in
She
Among Us.
is in a lot of
And the
stuff.
imposter could be any one of us.
She is in a lot of stuff though.
Hey, bro, they got everybody.
I think this calls for an emergency meeting.
So you'd rather call a meeting
it
than
go.
complete our task?
Oh, they're up on that stage yapping.
So good.
I'll have to report this to Mira HQ.
No, I mean, I don't think there's any.
Take it up with admin. And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. Get hyped for chaos, betrayal, and more in the Among Us series. Enjoy.
Ass.
I like your breath better, bro.
Emergency meeting.
Crewmates, our fellow mates of crew,
They have a TV show?
they would have
Why are you talking so weird?
let me
Yeah, but
just
I just don't understand why you're.
the official cause of
Take that
death,
ass.
acute
Wait,
ripping
they
off
have a
of the
TV
face.
show?
want their
Based
crewmate
on
considered
intergalactic.
They going all in.
Murder mystery.
This is unironically, I'm not gonna lie, I would actually
Y'all
watch
watching this? Oh my god!
No lie, I would actually watch this. This is like up the lane of like. Nah, I would watch this. This is on the watch list. Like this, like I watch Smiling Friends and shit.
I gotta hear if it's good
Like
first.
Smiling Friends and shit. Like
Unironically,
Peanut.
Happy Tree Friends.
Then I
The Happy Tree Friends was crazy.
Happy Tree Friends. Oh my god.
We're so happy to have you among us. Or is it amongst us?
That roller coaster episode. I always remember.
Yeah, somebody in chat. Once y'all watch that, let me know.
Paramount
what's
Plus?
up, bro.
Would you believe me if I said some of our biggest surprises at SGF are still to come?
Really?
Stay tuned. And it turns
my
out there's
God.
more coming from one of this year's best reviewed games, 007 First
Hey,
Light. Here's a first tease
Banger.
of a new story mission coming later
Banger.
this year.
I just beat this game the other day.
We've received an urgent call from Aleph, James. King Bavma requests MI6's help with a matter most sensitive, and he's asked for you, personally. Our alliance with Bavma is fragile at best.
Whoa, let me
but
stop.
if he has what
talking
he
before I
claims to
spoil.
have, well,
okay.
M figures the
I'm not
reward
gonna
is well
spoil.
worth the risk.
So I think I'm actually gonna buy
Go
this
back
game.
to Aleph and find out what
Game
this
is
is all
fun as
about.
hell.
Main right there, chat. Hold up.
Story is good too.
Best of luck.
The combat
007.
stuff, it's like Uncharted and Hitman mixed together.
Bob moi?
Oh,
I was getting another Switch segment.
Final
Fantasy
What the
Online?
fuck? On Switch? That's gonna be like
On the
max
Switch?
20 FPS.
So what happened to? Wait, am
Yo,
I
Switch,
tripping? So,
why are you guys like Nintendo?
I'll ask after.
Why is this here? This makes me think a direct isn't soon. I mean, they got unlimited money; they can do whatever. But still,
I'll ask after they're done with this shit.
Bro, I'm not understanding. Like, if they gonna book out certain like sessions
the
on why are those the
time
games they show?
is
I don't get it.
finally
None of those
here.
games.
What was that Souls like
been
that they
difficult.
showed only for Nintendo Switch?
These
Is that?
years,
that's
the unbelievers mocked you.
What is it called? I know what you're talking about though.
Tonight,
What happened
we
with
shall
that?
show
Is that out?
everyone how
We just don't know yet.
Dust Blood.
Okay.
Dust Bloods, yeah.
Okay.
That was the one I was looking forward to.
Oh,
This is
okay.
still in
That's what
development.
Fidel was telling me about. Gotcha.
Yeah, we need that game.
That one could be cool.
Bro, that was announced so long ago. Like, she bad. Okay, Sif. Oh, she. Okay, hold on. Two bad bitches. Hold on, this might be my type of game. 3 bad bitches. How many can I?
Yo,
put
Gamer,
to the
we're
max?
running out of time, bro. We only got 40 more minutes.
Do we?
That's still decent amount.
I don't know about 40. It says 2 hours.
4 bad bitches.
Oh, I guess it is
Five
supposed to be 40.
bad bitches.
You're right. There we are.
Ooh, 6 bad bitches. Oh, this game just still got all the hoes.
This guy.
Yeah, I knew the game. I knew the gameplay was gonna look like this.
Oh, I'm playing this. Are you crazy?
Is that a good thing? What the?
What? Why is FPS in 12 frames per second?
How much do they pay you, bro?
Oh,
Ain't no way
7
you
bad
can
bitches. I'm playing this.
He said, "Look, guy."
It's in 12 frames per second.
Wait, they run this on the Switch?
Oh, this gotta
That
get
gotta
played.
look like this. What the fuck?
Oh, this this looks crazy. Yeah, we on this. Yo, Tara, we on. Yo, Doge, we on this. Hello?
Okay, I guess.
Yo, you see September 2026. Buy for me. It's my birthday.
Here I was one
I'm
nigga
looking to
saying,
find the
"Ooh."
source of the disturbance
Heard
in
that?
London. To do that,
Oh,
I need to
that's the bingo chat. Gotcha.
Oh my god.
Gotcha.
This Cyberpunk crossover?
Maybe this is all a brain dance, a simulation.
Chad, I said I was gonna get on this. When does it come out? I guess it's
Maybe. Bingo.
The two of you really
I literally
I watched the trailer on stream, bro.
I hate this shit.
Oh, that's where I saw it.
I already seen
Gotcha's here.
What game? What game even is this for?
Moving waves.
Wow.
I'll get a copy of
Run.
Lucy and get off
I'll erase you at the finish line.
until Naruto drops.
Deleting your
Yo,
ass.
I'm done with Gotcha slot, bro. I'm done with that.
Come on! Eat less, loser!
Wow.
I can feel it.
All of a
I
sudden,
had nightmares
take
of
down
Discord is
into
looking
the
for us.
fluttering away Twa Hearts.
Lucy!
So fun. Cyberpunk. Love that. Love that show.
Yes. I'd rather be trailblazing.
Yay.
That was a look at what's ahead for Wuthering Waves and its collab with Cyberpunk Edge Runners on June 8th. Now, if you want to track all the games shown today, head to player.gg/SGF to see the full lineup and wishlist your favorites across all platforms. Right now, it's time for news on a massive expansion coming to a franchise that has been on this stage before.
That's a lot of different things it could be. Capcom.
Well,
Monster
yeah, I
Hunter.
saw Capcom. I had to sit up.
Monster Hunter.
Oh, it is Monster Hunter.
Yeah.
Okay. That's cool. I fuck with Monster Hunter.
I didn't put this on the list because this would have given in my opinion. That's why I didn't put this on the bingo.
This wild DLC?
Yeah.
Wait, what's your bingo?
Raytheon dated the weight of buildings and mounted the sky.
Wait, what's his
name, chat?
I can't stop wondering, how can all this exist up amongst the clouds?
Infamous 3?
I mean, this isn't just for Summer Games Fest. This is for State of Play next month too. But I did put Infamous 3.
Okay,
That's a
oh, right, you're right. Robocop. No, you're right. I forgot about Robocop.
You forgot about Robocop? Damn.
Yeah, that character. I mean, it's not been happening.
Could be here. I don't know. I mean, it's about time they showed you the next year's characters, you know?
They can affect the environment with just
When they
their
see you
presence.
dropping?
A moving natural disaster.
Too powerful to tame, too difficult to reproduce. Sounds like an elder dragon.
Summer 2026. It's gotta be here, no?
Okay. Wait, damn, yeah, no, that's soon. At least in the next 2 months.
Actually, they might show them at Evo.
Oh, that would make more sense, wouldn't it?
Good. I don't know.
Wait, Evo's at the end of this month, no? Vegas.
Yeah.
You on to that?
No. I don't think so.
No, what question mark?
Because I might end up going last minute, but I don't think so, no. I didn't book anything or buy anything.
Type shit.
You know it's all for nothing.
Fuck is this?
Still you press on.
Is it Onimusha?
Ooh.
Oh, it's
Shanghai.
not.
What is this?
What is that?
Where winds meet. Ooh, magic carpet?
Wait, what is China slot? What does that even mean?
I'm gonna be cooking.
What is this, Phantom Blade?
Nah, we saw Phantom Blade at PlayStation.
Okay. Alright, I feel like there's
I feel like I've seen like 20 of these types of games.
Yeah, I was literally just I feel like it's the same shit I've seen in the past however many Chinese type of games, bro. Like, come on, bro. Like, bro, Wu Chang, Falling Feathers, Phantom Blade
Zero,
Wukong. The entirety of Wukong, the entirety of.
I'm about to get a Zonkoi game as well. They're all Souls-likes too.
Like, yeah.
This shit must go crazy in China then.
It probably do still go crazy.
Just like how the fucking Sekai's hit anime fans.
Bro, this nigga just said it's Toho. Who needs to,
Just like how these Sekai's hit anime fans, they just milk the fuck out of this now.
See, I would say Neo, but Neo is one of a kind. I ain't gonna lie.
Yo, bro, that's a map he sold like game.
They got summons too.
Especially 2. Still gotta play 4.
I haven't finished 2. Bro, Neo games take fucking
I know. It's not that it's impressive that we've seen stuff like this before. It's not something we haven't seen before, you know?
What just happened? My play? You know
God, when they showing the whole boss fight, damn. Bro, this not even taking damage, bro. Some dev wanted to flex.
Nah. Full health bar with the frick.
Yo, I'ma put in 200K. Go up there and play my perfect run. Like, bro, what?
What the hell?
Oh my god,
like, I
we're
didn't
not
even
done.
see him take damage. Like,
He
that
didn't.
is
He
crazy.
didn't. That's the
Like,
thing. He didn't.
I couldn't even get a
That's what I'm saying,
animation
bro.
from my y'all niggas, bro.
He even take damage.
Full 0 damage run.
That was a new look at gameplay from Swords of Legend, a fantasy action RPG. There you saw a boss fight against Kong Kong Zi, with each move pulled from real centuries-old Chinese magic tradition. Now, how about a little toy car magic? Get ready for lots of loop-de-loops and massive jumps with the announcement of the biggest Hot Wheels racing game yet.
Oh.
This is Hot Cars.
Hot Wheels?
I said Hot Cars. Hot Wheels.
What the fuck?
Hot Wheels. Wow.
This would have been tough. Like, niggas open world?
What the hell?
Unironically, this would be tough, though.
Cool, right?
Nah, I ain't gonna lie. I was gonna say, like, this would be tough. I like.
Bro, if this. Nah, I would have definitely did.
I mean, I know what
On me. I'll get this rolling, bro.
I'm bro, Cyborg chilling me, bro.
Vidal, wet? Yeah, because I said I was gonna get it. 10 lashes.
What the fuck?
Yeah, I would have played this if I was like 14. So.
Once again, this might actually get bought for my little bro.
I was gonna say, if I was 14, bro, I'd definitely play this. Can we get Skylanders?
Whoa! Whoa! Wait a minute, wait! Whoa! Hold on! I'm waiting now. Hold on.
Wait, what's next? Never mind. Nah, it's just
What the hell?
Crossroads.
Mutant Ninja Turtles?
Ew! Why Donnie
Is that
like that?
Avatar? What the fuck is an Avatar stage?
They have anything for this game. SpongeBob or
Holy shit! This is year 2.
This is year 2.
What is on year 2? Godzilla, what the fuck?
They have it.
Gundam? Oh, not Gundam. Neo Genesis? What?
Oh, yeah.
Evangelion.
I said Neo Genesis.
What's the last one? An indie game.
Oh, Pico Park.
Oh, that's so random.
What the
There's a Sonic Pico Park game.
Wow.
I guess.
Okay.
Wow, okay.
Not what I wanted. What?
I'm gonna need more than that though, but
Happy
alright.
anniversary, Sonic, and happy birthday, Sega. All right, now the world premiere of a project that depicts the entire story of a famous anime from beginning to end.
Excuse me?
Excuse me?
Oh my god!
Dedicate your
Excuse me?
heart.
Yo, I would cry. For
Excuse me?
What?
Excuse me?
What does that mean?
Wait, attack him. Okay. Wait a minute.
Wait.
No, this is crazy.
What the fuck are they doing? This better be good, bro.
Bro, the last AOT game was on
Nah.
This better be good. This is so random.
You know how long ago an AOT game has been made, bro? Yo, this looks fucking crazy.
Oh, what the fuck? It looks rough as shit though, but
I like this. This is exactly how a game should look.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
that's so
The
random.
same exact textures as well.
That shit better play smooth. The 3D maneuver game better be fucking good.
Yo, my girl Hanj. This shit is tough.
Oh my god.
This shit is tough.
It actually looks pretty good at some parts. Some parts look a little rough, but like you can tell it's not finished yet.
Freedom! Freedom!
Wait, the last 2 games? Yeah.
Oh my
Attack
god,
on Titan
freedom.
July 1st. Oh my
They dropped
god.
two on the PS4.
That's next month. What the fuck?
From many of the creative leaders behind Forza Horizon
What the
comes
hell?
a new cinematic open-world driving experience. Set in Monaco and the French Riviera, where the worlds of pro and underground street racing collide. This is Clutch from Maverick Games.
Okay. That shit came out of nowhere.
Clutch. Maverick Games.
What is this?
We clutching. It's a racing game?
I know, we clutching. This is a racing game.
Huh?
Yo.
We have 2 drivers dead.
Damn.
3 more in intensive care.
Racing story game?
Yeah, I keep losing drivers.
My friend said you can help me.
My friend said you can help me.
Some people are meant to be outlaws, Leo.
Huh?
Think about it.
I did all that for you to get out of trouble. Now I'm in deeper than when I started.
Bro, slop is buzzword.
I can't be taking risks like this. I'm a lead driver in the R1 game.
Lead driver?
I've tried to help you. I'm not going to jail for you.
How are they doing that singing in the jail in a racing game? What the fuck? What? Ain't nowhere a driver need to be doing all that. What?
The dead won't rise.
Oh my god.
But their sons.
Okay, I'm serious.
What is this? Nigga, what out
For
Honor 2 would be crazy.
All respect.
Oh, this is clearly not For Honor, but.
What if this is cinematic?
Yeah, you're yapping.
Oh my god. Low Mogi got this. He's looking for the team.
Yo, I hate these type of games.
I'm gonna give all this.
Hey, if that's you, hey. Oh yeah, that's that one game.
We playing this? We or not? How's it go to hell? Wow.
Oh, I thought he was going.
On some 13 Reasons Why shit? Yeah, you go crazy.
Sheesh. Oh my god.
We have lots more Summer Game Fest ahead, and trust me, you definitely will want to stick around. Right now, here's a new look at Sea of Remnants from NetEase.
Sea of Remnants.
NetEase?
We started the show with feet.
What is this?
Wake up laughing, half a mess.
Stream about to get muted.
Every face is out of line, that's how I know they're all mine.
I like the quality, looks good, and the frame. But it's NetEase, they got like infinite money too, so I'm not surprised.
He said Midas is your game. Nah, okay, this is the Midas game.
Make it loud.
Say we're lost, say we're strange, say we're fading, drift away. But if memory lets us choose, I'll remember all of you.
Nah, this is all back to Bay Opening time though. What the?
Like, you know what I mean? Like, where's the game?
There is no gameplay, bro. You don't deserve it. There's a musical. There is no gameplay. We're watching a musical.
So can I get an understanding of what this is supposed to be?
I don't know.
Right after this.
AI generated song, bro. Y'all are assholes.
This shit is Iron Mountain, bro.
Anything but gameplay. But
nah, you see gameplay?
Oh, there you go. Oh, it's turn-based.
Okay.
They got gameplay.
It's turn-based. Okay.
I don't mind turn-based.
No, I wouldn't mind if it wasn't for that Iron Mouse ass music in my ear,
On a
bro.
show?
That damn thing! Whatever! You can't expose that! You can't just say that! You can't show that! Chill!
Whoa,
Guys,
whoa.
is it me or
I was focused on that Mega Man.
Whoa. Chill. Wait, chill.
Shut up.
Has he always had that mustache? He doesn't have a mustache.
Oh my god.
Hey, buddy, what's your deal?
Howdy. Name's Ryu. What's all this mess about me being different?
Well, look at that. He sounds different too.
What in the Sam Hill? Everyone in Tokyo talks like this.
I know what this is. It's called a knockoff.
Well, tarnation! Could a knock-off do this? Howdy, Dukin.
Yikes.
The Capcom Summer Game Sale is here. Take home genuine, bona fide, 100% authentic, real deals on select
Show the fucking characters.
No knockoffs.
Where are the characters?
I can't do it if you're watching.
Ladies and
Anything but the DLC characters.
representing
What the fuck is
elite
this?
ranks of the Ark Society.
Anything but the DLC characters.
Is this another Hitman? Or is this like an extension?
No, it's not.
Wiz
You
Khalifa.
know what it is. Oh my god, why the fuck is Khalifa boxing? Why is he boxing?
He just never did this. Wait, what?
The Wizard.
Don't got
Hitman.
Another thing for Hitman. Wow.
Why is a Hitman fighting Wiz Khalifa? Because in what universe do we need this power?
Wait,
Power? Update. Hold on, Jack.
Power on, so
Let me eat it.
hey, hold on.
Nintendo is not happy.
Just like that, I'm up.
Wait, this shit is
I
hard.
want to see Nintendo's face when they look at Power trailers.
Wait, look at that. Wait, that power look crazy.
What is Nintendo's face like when they look at Power trailers? Are they just like,
Wait,
they just like biting their teeth?
No, that gotta be. No, that's Rayquaza.
What the fuck?
No, Latios, sir, hold on.
Latios over to Rayquaza.
That is indeed a Rayquaza. What the fuck? Nintendo can't do shit about it, too. And they can't do shit about it. Did they lose the court case?
Wow. If they did, if they lose it, they lost something.
You got a Mega or what?
First time going.
Nintendo can't
That
do
impact
a
right
word about it.
Go.
Is this a get? Oh, I was about to say. I thought she was about to do a get singer for a second.
I thought you was about to do something crazy.
I don't think you need to kill it.
Hey, you can just not do this in the game, by the way. This is not possible.
Says who? Says who? Who can't?
Bro, what if you can in the new update?
This is all advertising.
She knocked that shit out.
Why she didn't catch it though? Sell it.
What?
Is that Arceus? Arceus.
Gotta be. Okay, hold on. I'm there.
Power World 1.0 is coming on July 10th.
Gameplay, bro.
Now, at the start of the show, I mentioned we'll have lots of new worlds to explore today, and the return of some long-awaited ones as well. This next game falls into that last category.
Returning games.
It's been a long
Naruto game.
Stop it.
Turning my volume up.
How many years? He said 8 years?
8 years. 8 years. What's this?
Wolf
No way!
What?
Shredded.
Finally! Oh my god!
Oh my god.
Time!
Son of a monster.
Somebody's screaming in the background. Oh my god.
Oh my god, it's finally here.
Precinct is
Immediate hit.
Bro, I remember I was in 4th grade when I first.
Bro, I watched this shit in middle school.
Yo,
I'll have your job within the week.
Are you living under a rock?
You're a raging dumpster fire of a person.
Bro, I gotta replay the first one, bro. I mean, I remember how it went. That shit was crazy.
I should replay it before. Just to remind
I need to
myself.
replay it before. Oh, damn. We didn't think we'd ever get it because Telltale shut down.
Ready to get to work?
Everyone was like, how the hell do y'all shut down? Y'all was making bangers.
Oh, thanks. Walking Dead, Wolf Among Us, bro. Those two
How y'all shut down? Y'all was making bangers. What happened?
They didn't have us thinking this. They should have made a lot of money.
The Batman game too. Like they had so many shit.
Batman.
What?
Oh my God! Did they remake the first one?
Look human.
His lips are sealed.
Wait.
But
No,
I'm
wait.
not helping.
They said experience this again.
I think
was wondering when you.
This was good.
Thank goodness.
Wait, this might be all
They fucking called. They remade the first one too. Oh, thank goodness. Updated graphics.
Oh my gosh. What?
No, that's smart. That's so smart. That's so smart.
That is actually.
That is extremely smart.
No, they're
You don't have to play the old one. You just play this one.
Y'all wasn't doing nothing the whole time.
Oh my God.
now I have
2026. This
That's
December.
right, Big B is finally back.
Finally.
And as we wait for his new adventure in 2027, check out The Wolf Among Us Remastered this holiday.
It's a holiday.
This next
26.
game comes from an acclaimed studio
The remaster
that
is
is
holiday
deep
26.
into development on its next project.
That's good.
Sheesh. Remaster The Walking Dead.
Oh, what's this? What's this? What's
Hell
this?
no, fuck that shit. Hell no.
What's
What's this? What's this? What's this? What's this?
No, it's not Stellar Blade 2.
This is Cyberpunk.
Who said
That's what I'm
that?
saying. You like Cyberpunk.
What is this?
It's gonna be a Cyberpunk.
What is this?
Being like Neo Tokyo.
What?
Who's singing?
Hold on, damn.
Oh my God, I think it is Stellar Blade 2.
Is it actually still?
Wait. What is that?
I haven't even played the first one, bro.
I think it is Stellar Blade 2. It is. Oh my fucking God, and I took it off of the thing.
GG's.
You had it on your Predix?
Yes, I had it on it yesterday. I took it off. It might be Stellar Blade.
Look at that Raiden?
Bro, that jacket is tough as fuck.
Wait, this
Oh,
looks like
God,
Stellar
that's the
Blade.
design or something, bro.
It's our first mission in
Oh, it's definitely Stellar Blade 2.
I'm pretty sure it is the music and everything.
Yeah, look at
The
the
fits, the
outfit,
music, the aesthetic, and I'm pretty sure it is.
Yeah.
Crazy.
That shit do look like. Hold on.
Quiet. They're moving.
Prequel? I don't know.
10 racks for that jacket. Plus.
Roger, Kenna. Track it.
Was Stellar Blade good? Yes.
Yeah, I ain't gonna lie. Yeah, bro. Holy
Yo,
Stellar
hey,
Blade.
nah, we got the AirPods playing.
How's it looking
Oh,
out
it's
there?
he's on
I
fire.
can't stand crowds. It'd be better for both of us if we got out of here quickly.
Let me see some ass.
Yeah, your chat is freaked
Always where
out.
things go
I ain't
wrong.
gonna lie, bro.
Yo, you gotta
Just
represent.
saying. It's a cliche. Wait, the target stopped.
What?
Hearken! The pulse rain shall cease!
Oh, whoa.
What?
Damn!
What the fuck?
Okay, hold on, Jackie.
Oh, she get popped.
Damn!
No swords, just no hands.
Yo!
Jackie Briggs right there.
She throwing hands.
There you go, ISO.
I thought that was about to be a blaster, bro. Put on the gauntlet.
Jeez.
What does he look like, Raiden?
Bro, that's what I said.
Wait, his tail is hard.
No way she jumped.
Hold on.
Damn.
Nigga physics is crazy. Now he put it.
Oh my gosh, into the train. Bro.
Nah, grinding his head on the train is crazy.
What?
Oh my God! Got an elbow blade?
He got the elbow katana? Oh yeah,
No, who's fighting style?
Bro,
Damn.
I fucking took this off the bingo chat. I'm so pissed. I took this off the bingo.
Yo, the latex cheeks though, that made the game
Bro. Returning to the world of Stellar Blade with an all-new sequel developed entirely by the original team that's here today. Set in the same universe as Stellar Blade, this next chapter continues the story beyond the events of the first game, introducing a new protagonist who you saw there, Evie. It's early in
Not
development,
Eve,
and we will have
Evie.
more to share in the future.
That shit's
All
hard.
right, we're almost done,
That was actually crazy.
but not quite. It's been almost exactly 3 years since Street Fighter 6 was released.
Finally,
in
let me
June
see this
2023.
DLC. What do we
What's
got?
ahead? This
Vegas,
is
the only
Street
thing
Fighter
that
6
get me
Year
hyped
4.
for Street Fighter.
Okay, lock in. Let's see if these leaks are real. Hopefully they're not. Oh shit, it's real.
Is already entering
Ingrid's here. You already know what she's about to do.
that we all
Bro, you know what Ingrid's about to do.
Wait,
She's like a god.
What the? Wait.
Who the fuck are you?
OC? OC? Oh wait, that actual original characters. Wait,
all originals?
Wait, is it actual original characters?
Okay, leaks are fake.
Okay.
Arjun, who the fuck? Bosch? Okay,
no,
okay, I was right. Bosch is the playable
He
character.
looks tough, though.
That's why they revived him. Because he was dead at the end of the story mode. Who's the last character?
I never knew that.
It's
Last
a guess.
character?
It's a guess, because Ingrid is here.
Don't be Tifa.
What?
Tifa?
Show the last
That would be
character.
nuts.
Oh, what if
That'd be
you
crazy.
Oh.
Well, it was
Bro,
real.
why she look so out of place?
It was
though?
real. Partially real. It was partially real. I knew Bosch would come back because at the end of when Ingrid dropped, they revived Bosch. Why would you guys randomly revive Bosch?
Hamaguchi-san. Yeah, no, Remember, that's that
Who's
Final
Yasmin?
Fantasy.
Arjun, who the fuck?
Bro, how?
I wonder if Bosch is gonna fight like that guy.
I like the two original characters. Though. That's cool.
Yeah, in World 2, Bosch fights like Kage. He was using like Axe Stick and Misogi and
Fighter
shit.
6 has reached its 3rd
But he had the
anniversary.
psycho power. He doesn't have
and
that
today,
anymore.
we're announcing the special collaboration with Final Fantasy.
Wow. I know some people that are happy and I know some people that are mad because people want her in Tekken, not Street Fighter.
だからこそ目指したのはストリートファイター6の世界で本当に戦っているティファの姿です。
Tifa is a character loved by the players all around the world. That's exactly why our goal was this: to bring to life a Tifa who truly fights within the world of Street Fighter 6.
But the reactions are ruined because of the leaks. So like,
I didn't see the leaks, but that was
the leak was Tifa,
そのままではなく新たな
Mike
バトルシ
Hager,
ステムとして再設定しています
Vega, and who was the last
Everything
one?
from her
I'm actually
design to
surprised
movement
Vega's not in
has
Who was the
been
last one?
built
I don't remember the
as
last one.
Tifa, the Street Fighter. Materia has also been reimagined as a new gameplay system.
What?
Yeah,
そ
she
して
used
今日は
materia
まだお
mid-fight.
見せできないんですがファイナルファンタジーの象徴的な要素もバトルに落とし込んでいます
We cannot show it today, but we adapted an iconic Final Fantasy element to the battle experience.
W, she used materia. Yeah, it was Goken, my bad. Yeah, Goken. Goken, Vega, Mike, and Tifa. That's what the leak was.
Tifa's fight is far from over. We hope you all look forward to what's coming next.
W, we get Tifa. That's what awesome.
ありがとうございます
I need to play more Final Fantasy. I want to play like 2.
Slacker.
Thank you to Hamaguchi-san and Nakayama-san for coming all the way from Japan to join us for that special moment on stage. And we'll see you guys again later this year. All right. Well, now it has come time for our final announcement.
Final.
Just one.
I know. What's it going to be, guys?
Final announcement.
What's it gonna be? Are you gonna do a fucking live service game again?
Frankly, I don't know what I could say to set this moment up.
Do not do a live service again.
Bro, don't do
GTA?
that
Get
shit
ready
no more.
GTA?
for the final battle.
What?
What?
Get ready for a final battle. What's that?
Is it Final Fantasy?
Long ago,
Wait.
Oh, it's Final
shadow
Fantasy!
fell
Wait!
upon our planet.
What's this?
What is this?
Wait, hold on.
Guided
It's gotta be Final Fantasy.
One man sought dominion.
One wing angel. Oh my god, it's Final Fantasy.
It's Final Fantasy.
Okay, what is the game name?
A meteor.
I thought it was about to be snatched.
Whoa, what the fuck is that?
But our planet.
It's part 3 of FF7 Reaper. What the fuck?
Awakening mighty
remake?
weapons to stand against the
Whoa,
celestial.
What the fuck?
Now,
What did Sephiroth do?
endures in those who fight.
Yo, Chad, I got Chipotle.
Long story short, world's in trouble.
World's in
Has
trouble.
been for
That
a
fucking
while.
meteor's coming
So
out.
what are we waiting for?
Everybody.
Let's give Sephiroth the beating of a lifetime.
Can we play as Vincent now or what?
Oh, this
Oh
looks crazy.
shit, the game looks beautiful.
Yeah, what the hell?
Oh yes, we can play as Vincent. Nice.
I'll make this quick. I'll make this a good night.
That's hard.
Oh shit! You can play this too. What the fuck?
I could do this.
What's the fucking Poly guy's name? Oh, wasn't it a Sid?
Oh.
Yeah, Sid. You play Sid.
Just ain't your day.
Ooh, Cloud fit kind of hard.
My, is that a weapon I see?
Wow, they saved the shit I've been wanting to see for the last 2 days. This shit Final
Save the
Fantasy.
planet by killing her protectors.
I want to play this. This looks crazy.
But you gotta play 1 and 2 first.
Oh, do I? Damn.
Let us
Yeah,
put our
it's
faith
all
to
the whole
test.
game is Final Fantasy 7.
Cloud.
They just
Okay,
split
okay.
it into 3 parts.
Bro, I need to. Oh shit.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to rewatch that. Revelation? It's not
Revelation.
Return? Revelation.
Never would have made it this far
Remake,
without you
Rebirth,
guys.
Revelation.
And I won't let you down. I promise.
Dude, wow, Revelation.
This was a good showcase, actually.
Yeah.
There you have it. And no, he's not done yet. Please join me in
What?
welcoming back
We're
to
not
Summer
done?
Game Fest, the
Not
director
done yet.
of Final Fantasy VII Revelation, Naoki Hamaguchi-san.
So are they gonna do like Advert Children DLC or like?
OST of Doom.
I hope they do an Advert Children DLC, chat.
I'm back!
I'm back.
Yo. ようやくですね、このファイナルファンタジー7リベレーションをマルチプラットフォーム同時で、発表できたことを本当に嬉しく思います。ここまで来れたのも、この物語を信じ、待ち続けてくれた皆さんのおかげだと本当に感謝をしています。
Street Fighter got
I'm
Tifa.
truly delighted to unveil Final Fantasy VII Revelation, which is launching simultaneously on
Ain't
all
that getting freaking
platforms.
Yujiro, bro?
Yeah, but they wanted Tifa.
It's gonna be
A lot
on
of people
all
wanted
platforms.
Tifa, but yeah,
And
Yujiro's
we've
still
only
good.
been able to come this far thanks to every single one of you who continue to believe in this story and waited for this moment with us.
Oh, damn, I gotta play 1 and 2
今
first.
作のテーマは決意です。クラウドたちは
I mean, realistically, you need to play Crisis Core. Crisis Core. Zack's
Oh,
game
bro, you
first,
might as well
but
send me the whole
Central
list,
theme
bro.
of this title is
Kill it if
Before
you
I gotta
want.
play this.
Cloud and
I mean,
his
do it, 'cause
companions
I'll play it.
each confront their own destinies and find the resolve to march
Where's Zeke? I know
toward
you
the
had him.
final
Zeke.
battle.
そして私自身もこのシリーズを完結させるという決意を胸にこの作品と向き合ってきました。
I too have carried a promise in my heart throughout this journey, the resolve to see the series through to its very end.
皆さんに最高の形でお届けします。ぜひ見届けてください。
We're committed to delivering this experience in its ultimate form.
So they
Please
need to
stay
do a
with
bundle.
us
They need to do a
and
bundle of all the
witness
games.
What lies beyond that resolve?
Because the old Final Fantasy
Today,
7 is just all one
To
game.
help guide us
okay.
on our path,
But for
please show
FF7,
me
they put it into 3 parts because the
welcome
games
to
are
the
so big.
stage.
What?
The voice
Wait.
of
Cloud?
Vincent Valentine,
Oh.
Matt Mercer.
Oh, cool.
Bro, he voices so many niggas, bro.
Thank
he
you
does.
very much, Hamaguchi-san. It's truly a privilege to be here with you today, if you know me. There's honestly so much to see in Revelation. I think we just kind of need to dive right in. What do you say?
Oh, we're doing a breakdown?
Let's do
Shit.
it. Take it away, Matt.
I don't mind if I do.
Oh, it's another video? Oh, shit.
As we reunite with
And
our
we get more-
heroes, the meteor looms in the skies above.
Okay, some
A
explanation.
constant reminder of your mission and the grave threats you'll confront as you embark upon your journey and face the epic
Another chill,
conclusion
fucking
of
go.
the remake series. Aboard the Highwind, your very own
Wait, they
airship
don't even
and the
show-
pride of the Shinra fleet,
can't even say
you'll
it's
take
a
to the
spoiler.
skies and witness our most expansive open world yet. From the outskirts of Midgard to the sun-drenched Medial Archipelago
Chat,
to the
what
warrior
about-
nation of Wutai. Simply pick a direction and set
Bro, chill,
sail.
bro.
But how can you be
Wait,
expected to protect the whole world at once?
Okay.
You'll need to cover ground fast.
It's cool and all.
Wait, I
It's not
just
for
realized
you.
what they didn't show.
Don't worry.
Have you played like Final
Parachutes your
Fantasy
top
like
of the
that,
line.
or no?
Pull the cord and pop. You'll be
Chill.
floating
I'm
through
gonna
the
say
air
it.
like a feather.
You know, my first Final Fantasy.
At any moment in the open
think it was
world,
on GameCube.
simply pilot the Highwind to your destination and take a leap of faith.
Lightly.
With the wind rushing past, you'll descend seamlessly from the sky above to the ground below.
I only played very minimal Final Fantasy.
Where will the winds guide you
I can't
first?
say it unless if you played Rebirth, you know what I'm talking about. But I'm not gonna say.
No matter your destination,
I played like
to
halfway
defeat
through
your
the
enemy,
PSP of
you'll need a
Crisis
fighting
Core.
chance, and that starts with your trusted
I'm
allies.
not a lot into Final Fantasy.
At long last, with the world teetering on a blade's edge, everyone assembles at Cloud's side, forming an epic ensemble of heroes, each with their own story that brings you closer together than ever. But a good unit needs more than friendship to save the day. It needs a disciplined combat regimen. The hybrid battle system, established in Remake and refined in Rebirth, is perfected in Revelation.
Remake
putting even
FF13,
more
bro. Lock
power
it in,
in
bro.
your
And
hands.
I played the
Inflict
turn-based
real-time
one.
action,
I never played that
seamlessly
one.
switch between party members
Bro,
to even
that's
the
my
odds.
favorite one of all
Then,
time. Yes.
when the fight calls for strategy, enter tactical mode to unleash a suite of powerful new spells and abilities.
How do you say it's not for you,
Activate
though?
devastating synergies with your companions. And of course, call on mighty summoned entities that can turn the tide of battle.
Oh shit.
I'll send you the thing. I put kinda, but no, you kind of have to play that one. First Explorer. Max.
Oh.
Max's reaction? Yeah, I know he's probably flipping the fuck out.
There are truly some chill-inducing fights ahead in Revelation.
Yeah,
I'm
he's flipping
so
out.
excited to see all of your reactions. It's gonna be amazing.
I'm guessing you have a favorite character to play in battles?
I might be a little biased, but since you brought it up, let's have a look at our newest coffin-dwelling companion.
Oh, Vincent game for let's go.
Vincent Valentine.
Well, okay.
Yeah, see his moveset.
Good to see some more adventure. This character's cool as fuck.
Oh, his game was ass.
His,
What was his game, chat?
Vincent
Surge of
is a deft
Cerberus? That shit is
gunslinger,
ass.
capable of delivering precise, high-yield shots.
It's a very old game.
There's more to this
bro, I know it
secretive
from
former
pictures, bro.
Turk than meets
Like-
the eye. The
Surge of
result of
Cerberus, that shit was ass.
experimentation at the hands of Shinra. Vincent can transform into the galleon beast at the press of a button,
this looks
gaining
cool.
tremendous power while transformed. And when combined with the skills of a certain ace pilot, their high-impact synergies disrupt the fight with ferocious results.
The Leaping Lancer, the Dashing Dragoon, the one and only Sid Highwind.
Sid
Okay, Final
Highwind,
Fantasy,
the cantankerous
Senki
pilot extraordinaire, joins the party
Kane.
and their mission to defeat Sephiroth. Sid's command of his lance allows him to rapidly close the distance for
Damn,
powerful
he's cooking.
strikes,
Hold on, he can
or
box
engage
like
in
this.
sweeping area of effect attacks to bring a whole host of enemies to heal.
I didn't know he had
but to
hands.
fully control the battlefield,
What is that, armor?
skill
What
with
the
a
fuck?
weapon only gets you so far. To further augment your
wanna know
combat
that this
capabilities, try this on for size. Function Integrated Tactical
Warrior.
Suit, or the FIT system for short, allows you
Are
to
these
further
classes?
customize your playstyle with
What?
new
There's
uniforms
classes
imbued with unique
now?
movesets. Alongside your equipment and materia, FITS gives you an extra edge in battle.
Oh, okay.
To face what's
Wow.
coming,
So certain
you'll need all the
outfits give
strength
you-
you can muster.
They're like
Turn
mini
stuff.
classes, yeah.
Sensing its fate hanging in the balance, the planet
Wow.
itself has
not
unleashed
just
its
weapons.
last
Yeah,
line
there's
of
like-
defense. The
I
weapons,
don't know
the
anybody got a
ancient
lot to
beasts
play.
that are
I
larger
wanna
than
catch
life
up on
and
this.
capable of untold destruction. Will you be enough to stop them before it's too late? As the world is torn apart, you and your
What the
friends must
fuck?
unite. In Revelation, we come to the thrilling conclusion
That's a
of the
big-ass
Final Fantasy
chocobo.
VII saga. And your
Yo,
mission
catch
is
it,
clear.
Tifa.
Take up your Buster Sword, equip your materia, and stand together. One last time.
These skies belong to me. Hope you're ready.
Damn. Date, please. No, they're not gonna give a date. They're not gonna give a date. Fucking no, they're not.
What is that?
Whoa, what the fuck is that? They're not gonna give a date. Highly doubt they're giving a date.
Well, thank you all. Thank you,
It's
Hamaguchi-san,
gonna be like
for bringing us
2028.
this extended look
Or
at
7,
Final
but
Fantasy
late
VII
7.
Revelation. I think I speak for all of us when I say we cannot wait to play it.
But Mark,
We're not
I
done.
think we ended the video too early.
Oh my
I hate to
god.
leave a story unfinished.
What?
Is that right? Well then,
Wait a second. They might start spoiling here.
What that mean?
Get the
Trying to get everyone to play. That boy's so packed up, bro.
What the fuck?
What is
that?
Oh wow.
What the
Is that his mouth or his eye?
What on earth?
Yo, what the fuck?
Hey, yo.
Sheesh. Oh my god. Oh, nobody survived.
Not get hit by that.
What?
That shattered the
Spring?
At last,
Oh my god.
promise is fulfilled.
All
The
platform.
journey ends here.
Wow.
Okay, I didn't think we were gonna get a
Even
date.
Swift
I
is
didn't.
getting
I
it.
did.
Wow.
Wait, what's this?
So this time next year.
There has to be a bundle. Surely there's a bundle.
They're showing all
What the
games.
fuck?
There you have it.
$80
Final
game.
Fantasy VII Revelation coming
That's a
to
good
all platforms next
Wow,
spring.
let's actually
which
drop
is
it on
appropriate
all
for today
platforms
because SGF is really a celebration
instead of
of
just
games
like
across all
PlayStation first for like a
platforms.
year.
Thank you to Hamaguchi-san,
Chat, when you raise
Kiru-san, and
Summer
the team
Game
at
Fest
Square
2026.
for that very special announcement.
That's pretty good.
And thanks to Lucy for a great job coaching. Didn't she do great?
Yes, Lucy.
Wow.
Thanks, Jeff. What an amazing way to end the show, but that's not all, because
What?
coming up right now is Day of the Devs with a look at
Oh,
many
I was
new
about to say,
independent
like,
game
don't say that.
titles,
No, we good on
including multiple new game announcements.
That's right. Tons of awesome indie games, so make sure to stay
we
tuned
good
and
on that.
watch that, and we will see you live this August.
Yeah, I know for
in
sure
Germany
Max is,
for
like,
Gamescom
gushing out his
Opening
fucking
Night
brain or
Live,
something.
Streaming live
He's
on
foaming
Tuesday,
out his damn
August
mouth for
25th.
sure.
Until then, have a great summer, everybody.
Jeez.
Oh yeah.
And one more
And they
buffer.
buffed- and they buffered that buffer. And
One more buffer for good measure. These guys.
Oh yeah. Buffer that is amazing. Let's switch out the mud down the plastic.
Right now!
Alright. WWW. I give that a
Solid
like a
7.3.
I give it like an 8 out of 10. Last, they saved the best shit for last for me, at least.
I'll give it like a.
Like I wanted the FF and I wanted the Street Fighter, and it was
7.8.
last. But there was a lot of
I might as well
stuff.
give it an 8 actually.
FF, Street Fighter, Stellar Blade. What was the other shit they got announced? Fucking Tupac, Stranger Than Heaven.
Yeah, Tupac is crazy.
That's what Tupac was
Tupac,
crazy.
Stranger Than Heaven came out on this guy's head. Oh my god.
Yo.
What is this? Dude, look at this good shot.
What the?
His head is.
No.
Why is
Yo,
his head
no.
like that? That shit threw me off completely.
Oh, that was fucking. This dude looks like the good Khalid.
Son. Son. Does it look good? As expected, as expected. Oh my god, Tifa and Ari Engine. Her costume too gonna be. Let me stop. Let me stop. Let me stop.
You know she's gonna be super doomed out. Oh my.
Her costumes are gonna be insane.
No.
Her costumes are gonna be ridiculous. Alright, I'll catch y'all later though. I give that 8 out of 10. What y'all give it? 6?
Oh yeah, 6.
6?
8.
8? 9? Chat, what y'all give it?
I give it a 7.
Perfect time and I just finished eating, bro.
Alright, we gotta do this again on what? Sunday. Xbox.
Sunday, 7th.
What's Sunday?
At
Try to make a comeback.
what time?
And the next one's
That one's at 1 p.m. EST though, so probably a lot of y'all not gonna be here, but 1 p.m. on Sunday EST. So yeah, that's pretty early, but it do be like that.
I bet that.
Bet. Alright. I'll catch y'all later.
Alright, chat.
Alright, chat. Let's play some games now.
I think it demands.
But I want to
entirely
rewatch some of those trailers.
term.
You already know Max is foaming out his fucking mouth right now. I just know he is. He's probably losing his shit. He's losing his shit.
Guys, so much shit. Oh my god. They did not talk about a gameplay shakeup.
Bro, how much subs does he owe? Why is there 100,000, 10,000 gifted for MVC4? Yeah, all right, buddy. Yeah, all right, buddy.
It literally
yeah,
was a
buddy.
Vega.
Nah, I'm staying on. I'm staying on. I'm not
Holy
ending.
shit.
Damn, we didn't get to see Cyclops. I'm kind of sad about that. So what happened, chat? Let's see. What did happen? What didn't happen? Sheesh. Nothing you wanted, but still a stack. Yeah, it was a stack dark in my opinion. Damn, I took off Stellar Blade. I fucking had it on here yesterday, and I took it off like a dumbass. Oh my god. What was the other game I took off too that ended up happening? Dude, the games I took off ended up happening. Oh god, bro. Stellar Blade 2. I took this off. It ended up happening. RE5. I had this on here and I took it off. Yeah, I had Sonic. I transferred that. RE9 DLC didn't happen. Oh my fuck. I should have transferred the RE5. I did. Anyways, okay, what happened? So Tokon happened. Street Fighter happened. Strive did not happen. GTA did not happen. PlayStation, I'm gonna assume that's gonna be an Xbox showcase. Sonic happened. FF happened. Intergalactic did not happen. Cyclops did not happen. FF16 didn't happen. Zong Koi did not happen. DMC didn't happen. Virtual Fighter half happened. I still am confused on the Virtual Fighter thing. Is that a standalone game, or is that just the story mode they showed? I don't know. Persona 6 was probably gonna be out Xbox. Crazy Taxi did not happen. Blade did not happen. DOA 7 did not happen. Wolverine happened. Kingdom Hearts did not happen. RE9 DLC didn't happen. Mega Man didn't happen. And the fucking Chicken Souls like game did not happen. Oh my god. Jeez, bro. Bro, that guy's head is throwing me off completely. Son, what the fuck am I looking at, dog? What am I looking at? Damn, so the Tifa leak was real, but the others weren't. That's insane. That's actually quite hilarious. I had a feeling Tifa leak was real the moment we saw Ingrid. I'm like, oh, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. That makes fucking sense. Bro, this dude Fidel, bro. He saw the Sonic shit and lost his mind. This dude Fidel, he saw the Sonic shit.
Yeah, no, I think that's a.
This dude Fidel, bro. What a build indeed.
Sonic Crossroads! TMNT!
I don't know a bigger Sonic fan than him, bro.
What?
Nobody's a bigger Sonic fan than Fidel, I promise you.
We got the elements! Wait, this was year 1! They're gonna do year 2! Oh my god!
Yes. No, he was just sitting there.
City Escape! Godzilla! Oh my... Dude!
He's ripping his shirt off. Oh, my fucking page crashed.
What?
Oh.
What?
There we go. Oh, this over Sonic? Bro, he's had worse. He's had worse. This is tame in comparison to like what when Sonic Frontiers was announced. This is tame. This is him tame. This is tame in comparison to his other reactions. Very tame.